Hey gang, Wes Buck here, Drag Illustrated Magazine, checking in. It is Wednesday, August 11th, 2021, and we are so excited to have you. We got an incredible show lined up for you today. We're going to be joined here in a little over 15 minutes by Top Fuel standout Joey Haas. A few minutes after that, we will bring Lyle Barnett, everybody's favorite Doorslammer drag racer, to the party. But I appreciate you guys being here so much. Every Wednesday, we take tremendous pride and honor in being able to kind of kickstart the drag racing conversation here in drag racing's water cooler, if you will, if you'll have it. We come here every Wednesday to get the conversation started, get people talking about the sport of drag racing, talk about subjects that we believe are near and dear to the heart of racers, explore different subjects, different topics, different events. And we're just so excited for you to be a part of it. So please, not only do we want you to be a part of the conversation, like post in the comments and tell us what you think and call us names or whatever you want to do today, but please click like, click share, help us spread the message. We really find it makes a tremendous difference here on these social media platforms to get some momentum. And so we beg of you, we ask of you, and we appreciate it. Click that share button, spread the message. And yeah, man, what a wild weekend in the sport of drag racing. I hardly know where to start. It's typically the weekends after a big national event, an NHRA race, a PDRA race, an NMCA race, a Midwest Pro Mod Series, or a Midwest Drag Racing Series event, or what have you, that gives us 10,000 things to talk about. But this weekend, it was really the independent drag racing scene that I feel flexed its muscles on us and really, I think, raised a very interesting question, as you see in the title of the show here today: one night only. Is this the future of drag racing? Is this something we need to see more of? We had 3 tracks this past weekend demonstrate what appeared, by all accounts, to be near sellout crowds, capacity crowds at Summit Motorsports Park for the Night of Fire. The same thing at Firebird Raceway in Boise, Idaho. Same situation at US 131 Motorsports Park up in Martin, Michigan. And I just have to ask myself, are these events special because they only happen one time a year? Or are they special because they are a one-night only, concise thrill show type of environment, type of production? So I don't know what the answer is necessarily, and I think we should explore it here today on the show with my main man, Murder Tundra. What's up, big dog?
What's up?
Man, same old stuff, same old stuff. What's going on with you? Have you shared the show yet?
Yep.
You swear?
I swear.
Do you promise you did?
I promise.
All right, man. Well, Jerry Lester in the house. Brady Russell, what's going on, guys? I appreciate it. What's up, Sam Smith? We got Millstadt, Illinois in the house, just back from Bonneville. What's going on, man? It's hard to. What do you make about land speed racing? Do you follow that scene at all, like the Bonneville scene and any of that? I mean, it's obvious. Speed Week's a huge deal. There's all sorts of cars and racers out there, but it seems like it's a real left turn from drag racing.
It does, doesn't it? I mean, no, I guess I see some of the posts and stuff, but I don't follow it at all, really.
Oh, shoot. I just got to mute myself. Yeah, it's interesting, man, because I feel like for as much hubbub is made about so many of these things, setting these records out on the Bonneville Salt Flats and whatnot, I do feel like it lacks in media coverage, right? I mean, you have to be super hardcore, like ear to the ground, listening closely. I mean, you got to be paying attention really, really, really to a lot of tight-knit circles to get the information out of that scene. Matter of fact, it's pretty cool to even get out there. No, I've never been, man. And I think probably one of those, you got to know somebody that knows somebody that knows somebody to really go out there and feel like you know what you're doing. I think if we just showed up,
if you went, though, it'd be one of those things that you'd be super into, like from then on out. Like you went one time, it'd be your thing.
I can see how it happened. Well, I think that's what happens with drag racing. I mean, I got to be honest. I mean, obviously I'm biased, but I mean, have you ever brought anyone out to the racetrack and had them tell you, this sucks. I never want to do this again. I never want to come here. Yeah. But it's that action of getting someone to actually come to the track, right? That's the challenge. That's what makes all the difference. But once you get someone out there, in my opinion, I don't think very few people are going to just throw their arms up and be like, yeah, this isn't my deal, man. It's not my deal. Great comment here from Monday Morning Racer. I love having Mr. White, the Monday Morning Racer himself, live Tuesday nights on the CompetitionPlus.com Power Hour with Sam Smith. Every motorsports has its root in land speed in some way, even NASCAR before Daytona International Speedway and before the sand. Of course, you had land speed on the beach. It's so true, man. And I do think that there are segments of the drag racing audience that really struggle to shake that. We've talked about it before here. We're big fans of win lights. We're big fans of talking about competition, but it does seem like time and time again, drag racers want to talk about who went the fastest.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, we're going to talk with Joey Haas here in just a few minutes. And it's funny because part of the conversation we're going to have with Joey is about the incredible run he and his team made in that 1957 Chevy Funny Car this past weekend at US 131 Motorsports Park, busting way down into the 5-second zone, almost 290 miles an hour. And it's funny because, I mean, shame on me. I didn't ask him like, hey man, how'd all the racing go? We immediately dive into this conversation about how fast did you go and how does that compare to everybody else? Is that the fastest car in the country? Is that the fastest one in the world? And shame on us, because I don't necessarily think that every ounce of entertainment value that drag racing has to offer is rooted in what shows up on the scoreboards. I am actually completely over it, to be honest.
Yeah.
Don't you think like how long does it last too? Because I mean, eventually we're going to run up on the limits of, the laws of physics.
Well, we keep saying that.
Well, we do keep saying
and it keeps, like bam, bam, bam. Like, no way, you never go any lower. And then it happens. So
it's incredible.
It's crazy what they're doing anymore. Just about in every class, right? I mean,
pretty much, man. I mean, don't you remember right here on this show, Wednesdays, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, talking about the next performance barrier being an impossibility? Oh man, I don't think that'll ever happen. We're years away from that. And then the next thing you know,
the next
event
or whatever.
That fall, it happens, man. It's a really, really, really interesting time for the sport of drag racing. But I do wonder, like, how I think we've seen that making the whole story about what numbers show up on the scoreboard. I mean, I don't mean to make yet another No Prep Kings reference or a Street Outlaws reference, but I mean, if you look at those events, people are losing their mind, climbing over top of one another to get into these events, and there are no numbers ever shown on the scoreboard.
We did it in Denver. I mean, we tried it in Denver.
Yeah, we did it at the World Series of Pro Mod, and to be honest, it was met with a lot of resistance, right? I mean, I was fired up about it. I couldn't be more determined to do it the way that I wanted to do it, but it was met with some resistance. Now, granted, I think everybody kind of understood what we were trying to do and what I believe we did when we flipped those boards on Saturday night and let the world know what these cars were running. But I don't know, that air of mystery and not knowing, I don't know.
And then you had everybody up on the line, because
all the gossip,
because they had to come watch these guys make runs down, to see, hey, I don't know who I'm going to draw, right? So
I think it's amazing, man.
Yeah. So they were up on the line, paying attention to every run, just in case they had to run them. So I don't know. There was cool things about it for sure.
I think it's personally, I think that's just a part of our sport that's lagging behind. That showmanship aspect. I think we get so laser focused on the competition aspect and, how can we maintain the integrity of the sport? And I would never advocate fixing a race or like setups and things like that. That's not what I'm really talking about. But I do think leaning into some of that pomp and circumstance and showmanship and having those conversations with your racers, because it's tough. And it was funny. I actually had a conversation this morning with some friends at Flow Racing, I believe the worldwide leader in streaming sports online. And we were just talking about how so frequently we hear racers and promoters and members of the motorsports industry talk about how they wish things were like, oh man, I wish there were more sponsors. I wish there were more big races. I wish there was more interest in this class, more interest on this or whatever. But immediately behind that is, well, I want all that, but I don't want anything to change. I want to do it like we've always done it, and it's just this ironic, never-ending battle of, it's like we all want more sponsors. We all want bigger purses. We want all these things, but it doesn't really feel like we're willing to do the things that are required to create that environment.
Except sit around and bitch about it.
Right.
And that's contagious, a negative work environment or around a bunch of negative people. You'll find, I don't care how positive a person you are, you will sit there until they beat you down enough. The next thing you know, you're talking negative as well, and you don't even
become one of them. Yeah,
making conversation, basically, you know, at that point.
And I do wonder, how much does that hinder the sport of drag racing? Because the bench racing conversation is almost always
Right.
this ongoing discussion about what's not being done right. Right. Yeah. I mean, you know, it's so funny because no one wants to talk about all the incredible things that are happening or all the victories. I see this especially on social media. Here recently, well, actually yesterday, to talk a little bit about current events, the NHRA laid out a pretty insane, a pretty like sweeping rule changes for the NHRA Pro Mod Series. And there was some post about it online, and it's an interesting, very polarizing topic. But I noticed immediately all the comments were, this is NHRA ruined it. The no hot rods allowed club, just bad news, bad news, bad news. Drag racing's dying, all these things. And I'm like, where do you live? Like, what are you talking about? Have you been to a race lately? I mean, drag racing's doing the exact opposite of dying. I mean, I got to tell you, man, car culture feels like it's enjoying something of a revival. Am I crazy? That's when I saw those comments yesterday, I almost got like fired up and angry because I'm going, what drag racing are you paying attention to? Because I don't see
during COVID, maybe refound their passion for hot rods and stuff, and you know, or had a chance to fix up that car that's been sitting in the garage forever, or have a project with your son or your buddies down the road because you're all stuck together. You know, I mean, really, I mean, I think that it maybe, you know, maybe it kind of slowed everybody's lives down enough where you had some time to do some fun shit like that.
I think it did, man. I mean, and it does. I mean, no matter what anybody says about the television shows and Street Outlaws, No Prep Kings, and I think it extends. Like, what are some of the other ones? Murder, Fast and Loud, Gas Monkey Garage.
Getaway car driver or something. I don't know. I recorded it. I haven't watched it yet.
There's a slew. I mean, Top Gear, I think, is even included in this conversation. There's Motor Trend. Every time I flip past that channel, or not flip past it, but like see it on the guide, there's a car show, racing, some sort of build off or some sort of competition. There's shows on Netflix, right, that are all about street cars and racing.
Oil is involved in a lot of this, you know, I mean.
Oh, it's insane, man. Yeah. And I look at all that stuff and I go, how can anyone think that these aren't, to Jeff Bonfield's point in the comments here, watching on YouTube, reminder to everybody, you can watch along on YouTube or here on Facebook. Exactly right, man. These are the good old days. I mean, you don't got to look very far. I'm still kind of just losing my mind about a couple of events that happened a couple of weeks ago. The Dig or Die 2 No Prep shootout that took place in the shutdown area of Rockingham Dragway. For what it's worth, I saw multiple pictures, multiple videos of this event, and there are people everywhere. There was 117 cars that entered that race. We did a story on dragillustrated.com about Mike Gunter, who won 7 rounds straight and ended up putting over $30,000 in his pocket, his part of a $60,000 purse. And I thought to myself, how could someone see this and not be excited about the sport of drag racing? Because listen, I've got all the respect and admiration in the world for the stars of the NHRA and the stars of the PDRA and the stars of the NMCA. But those super high-level cars, that's not attainable for everyone. So when I look at events like Dig or Die, Corey Stamper put on a Cash Days event this past weekend at Shadyside Dragway. I mean, these events are happening all over the country. They are somewhat flying under the radar, but there's some incredible drag racing going on, incredible competition for real money. And I talked to Mike Gunter about the investment that would have to be made to have a car like he had and go compete like that. I mean, he's like 50 grand, maybe, you know, around there, somewhere around there. Well, there's a lot of people that have have a decent job, have a $50,000 boat, have a toy car, you know, whatever their hobby is. That's not out of the realm of reason for a whole lot of people.
Man, 50,000 doesn't even get you that much anymore if you go to a car dealership. I mean, you go around and look at cars now. It's crazy what used and new cars bring. I mean, 50,000 is very obtainable.
Yeah, I mean, it really is. I mean, and you can, in a lot of instances, like, I mean, I hate to, you know, kind of like talk. It's tough sometimes for racers to borrow money for cars that don't have VIN numbers, that don't have a title, right? And that's, you know, you see that all the time. But you go and no prep racing or whatever, and you need something that's got, you know, a license plate on it. You need something that's got a VIN and can be insured or whatever, and demonstrate its street worthiness to some extent. hey man, you might be able to go finance that thing. You may be able to finance your race car if you know your banker. If you got,
I just go to those title loan places and
that's the spot.
Put all my wife's vehicles on it.
It's true, man. But no, I just think it's a really interesting thing. And anybody that thinks the sport of drag racing's not in a really good spot, I think is choosing to believe that. I truly do. I think that those people are saying they want it to be bad. They want it. That conversation's fun to have. And I will say, I've experienced this in my own life, and much to your point, Murder, about, negative people and being around folks like that. Not only is that conversation like pervasive and it gets in your mind and it spreads, it's also, I think, familiar for drag racers. Does that make sense? Like, that's just what we're used to talking about, right? I mean, it's just, we've been bagging on the NHRA for 70 years. We've been mad at the man for as long as we can. And it would be very unusual for any of us to change that conversation, to change the narrative. And I think before we bring on our first guest of the day here, Top Fuel standout, Nostalgia Nitro ace, Joey Haas, I want to challenge everybody, again, please click share, help us spread the message, shine a light on the sport of drag racing. But I challenge you all, be a part of changing that narrative. The sport of drag racing is enjoying a really incredible time right now. Whether it's the NHRA, there are certainly issues, and there always will be. But if you look across the board from Streetcar Takeover, selling out, right? All these airport events that have popped up for streetcar enthusiasts, the nostalgia scene, holding steady. Look at what Chris Graves is doing with the Nitro Chaos and Funny Car Chaos series for funny car racers. That event that took place a couple of weeks ago that basically brought Nitro racers from all walks of life to Eddyville Raceway Park. These are successful happenings. Look at the PDRA, killer competition, hosted their first all-star event. The NMCA and NMRA, by all accounts, I've talked to multiple people that operate in that scene. They're having a banner year. Independent events such as the aforementioned Summit Motorsports Park packed the place for Night of Fire this past weekend. US 131 packed the place. I mean, we're seeing it across the board. We've got people racing cars on television that have like 28-inch wheels on them. Donks. Donk racing has become a thing, right? So anyone who's looking at the sport of drag racing saying that the cup's half empty is bananas, is completely out of their mind. I'm in.
We need to build.
I'm in on donk racing. Okay. And I really, another great comment here from the Monday Morning Racer, drag racing is doing well as a whole. The people who chatter negatively, it's from a narrow perspective. No prep is dangerous. Pro stock is boring. Eighth mile isn't real drag racing, and so on. And that's a really, really astute observation. And I go back to it's just familiar. It's what we've always done. It's just what we've always talked about. So
someone's trying to give you a place to race. Someone's trying to put on an event for you to come in and take their money, but you're going to sit there and bag on it because they're shorthanded today and so stuff's not working quite right in the lanes or whatever. I mean, it's like, man, they're trying to give you a place to race. Remember that.
I couldn't agree more, man. It's a tough situation because I think we all have to kind of take a little bit of ownership that, are we contributing? Are we part of the solution or are we part of the problem? I would argue that anybody that's pouring fuel on those fires, anybody that's contributing to those beating down the NHRA, listen, I'm the first one to feel the need to offer a critical opinion when necessary, right? I like
the need for
the need for speed. I think it's positive to critique these deals. I think it's fantastic to do that stuff and have those conversations. But if it's all rooted in just wanting to burn it down, right?
Yeah.
Let's just burn it down. And that's what I kind of feel, especially on social media. If you turn up at a racetrack, you don't really get that vibe from anyone. I mean, whether it's a fan, whether it's someone that's involved with the production of the event, whether it's a racer, by and large, the mood is good. I ask that of our writers all the time. When I talk to Nate Van Wagenen, whenever our editor-in-chief steps on the property at a PDRA race, you can ask Nate. I always ask him the same question. What's the mood? What's the talk? How are people? And whether it's a Midwest race, whether it's an NMCA race, anytime we send out a representative, I want to know what's the mood. And by and large, people are fired up. People are excited to be racing. People are glad COVID, knock on wood from our mouths to God's ears is maybe someday going to be behind us. But the mood is positive. But if you look in the comments section on Facebook, most frequently, or on the Twitter feed or where have you, you would think the world is ending. You would think this whole thing's bursting into flames. So anyways, I challenge all of you to be part of the solution to help us change that narrative. The sport of drag racing is incredible shape right now. Again, there's certainly room for improvement. There's things that we can do better, but by and large, car culture, racing, alive and well. Video games, podcasts coming out of the woodwork, all sorts of video content. There's so much content on YouTube that relates to drag racing. I don't think you could watch it all. You couldn't watch all the content that exists on YouTube around the sport of drag racing. So for what it's worth, those of us here at Drag Illustrated, we believe we are enjoying the good old days of drag racing. We're living in the good old days of drag racing. And with that said, I want to bring on our next guest, first guest of the day, the one and only Joey Haas, Murder Tundra. I'll throw you in the background here, and we'll bring you back around here in a few seconds. What's going on, buddy? All right, hold on. I got to get rid of you, T. My bad. What's going on, Joey? Welcome to the show, man.
Good.
Oh, I'm doing good, man. Thank you so much for being here. We've been trying to connect for a couple of weeks because, in all fairness, the big story around Joey Haas really started a few weeks ago at the NHRA Mile High Nationals when you found your way to the final round of what is, I believe, to be one of the biggest races on the NHRA national event schedule. The Mile High Nationals are special for a multitude of reasons. That environment, that facility, the people involved with that race, Mopar, SRT, Dodge, all the companies that rally around that event. A really, really fun one for anybody that's a fan of drag racing or a racer. If you ever want to go out to a race that'll make you proud of our sport, go to the Mile High Nationals. I can't imagine what it felt like to not only show up to that event, which you were likely just thankful to be there, but somehow find yourself in the final round. Can you take us through some of that emotion going from, hey, happy to be here to, hey, we may win this thing?
Well, I mean, we just go there with intentions of winning a round. I mean, that's like Torrance winning the championship to us. So we go there with our parts and our pieces that we've got. Terry told me on the first round of qualifying, he said, well, if it feels good, you could take it to the finish line. And, so I said, all right. And he said, if it feels good at 800 feet, it would probably be enough for us to get a good run on the car, good data on the car. So it went out there to about 800 feet, and that's where I lifted to just save some parts and save some money. And it went 405 at 259, and we looked at the time slip and thought, man, that was really on one, because a low 390 for us is a really good run. So looking at the early numbers, it was right on to be a low 90, maybe even a high 80, and maybe a little more mile an hour than 300.
We just lost him. We lost him, Murder Tundra. We'll have to bring him back in a second. I don't know where he went. Maybe his phone died. We'll find out here in a second.
Okay.
Look at this right here. The first Mile High Nationals in 1979 made its return in 1989 after a complete renovation in 1988. Have you seen any of those photos of Bandimere Speedway from like the early days and how different it looked?
Yeah.
It's incredible what they've done with that facility. I feel like we end up talking about Bandimere a lot here on the show, but they deserve it, right? It's one of the coolest racetracks on the planet, man.
They set up a driving range for me when we were there. Remember, you came up and hit a couple, yeah.
I did.
He was all excited about it too. It let me hit balls off the mountain. I thought, man, that's awesome. I
think it's fantastic, man. It's going there. I really wanted to go this year. It was on the same weekend as Keith Haney's wedding, good buddy of mine. So of course it was an easy decision to make, but I can't wait to the next time I get to Bandimere Speedway, to be honest. There's something about that facility that it's got an atmosphere like very, very, very few facilities have, man. It's special out here. 1989 marked the first year for Mopar to sponsor the Mile High Nationals. To this day, it's the longest running title sponsor for a national event in history. Oh, we got Joey back. What's up, big dog?
I don't know what happened, but
it's all good, brother.
We don't have the best internet in Tennessee, so it may be on my end. But
well, it could be, man. It could be. There's nothing wrong with Tennessee, though. I like it there.
Yeah, no, we enjoy being out here in the middle of nowhere, but internet's not good. So back to Denver. Terry told me the car would go to go to 1,000 feet, but we clicked it a little early and got our data on that Q1 run and got everything ready for Sunday. And then he looked at the numbers and thought, well, we could tweak it here, tweak it there. And first round eliminations rolled up, and it's against Alex Laughlin and Palmer's deal. So it was two guys. I mean, you really don't even know who the underdog is. Alex has a million runs down the track, but not in Top Fuel.
Not in Top Fuel.
And I'd have to add them up. I'm not a guy that keeps everything on a spreadsheet to know exactly how many runs I got in one of them things, but say 10 or 12. So we were both new. We go out there and, Terry tells me it ought to go to the finish line, and, off we went against Alex, and they smoked the tires, and he tries to recover it. And we, like normal consistency, and it went to the finish line, and that's what got us on to the next round.
I'm curious, one of the things that I've talked about here a lot on the show, and that we've kind of labored over on the pages of Drag Illustrated magazine over the years, is where are we at in the life, I don't know, in the life cycle of the Nitro dream? It feels like a few years ago that door was closing, right? I mean, I don't know why necessarily I felt that way. Maybe it's just the super teams, the Don Schumacher Racing, Coletta Motorsports, John Force Racing, these huge conglomerates that seem to dominate, right? I mean, the Torrance is obviously in that conversation, even though they're a 1-2 car team most of the time, but it just felt like the dream was kind of evaporating. The notion that a young guy such as yourself or a young guy such as Alex Laughlin could dive into Nitro racing, it just seemed like it was fading. I hated it because it felt like it was in the rearview mirror, that we were seeing the decline of that. But here's Joey Haas. Here's Alex Laughlin after many, many, many years in the sport with sponsors and all these other things, making that big jump. It felt like that wasn't really happening. It felt to me, for the most part, and you're always going to have the guys that go out and support these series and show up as often as they possibly can. But the big injections of potential or what have you, or opportunity in the sport and Nitro racing seemed like they were the next billionaire business owner. Like it felt like we were just waiting on another Alexis DeJoria, another Connie Coletta, another Steve Torrance, people that can have the money to spend and choose to spend it on drag racing. What is it about Nitro racing? I mean, am I wrong about that? I mean, because you could probably give us a little bit of insight as to the expense of doing this. You talked about shutting off at 800 feet to save some money. I mean, do you feel as an up and coming driver, there's an opportunity to generate enough revenue by way of maybe match racing or sponsorships to chase the Nitro dream, Joey?
I mean, I think there is, there's a few things that play into the factor of it. Terry Totten's got a really good handle on the car. Knock on wood, we don't hurt much. But stepping back from the things, just looking at it as a perspective, I think when you do have these big corporate marketing, corporate sponsorships, when those things start to fall and it takes some corporate money out of the class, which it's a double-edged sword, so you've got to have it. You've got to have the big marketing. You've got to have the big teams. But whenever you scale back, so say you had 16 teams that were out there with corporate sponsors, the little guys wouldn't stand a chance. If you've got 6 cars out there with corporate sponsors, well, there's room for the smaller guys at that point. So over the last couple of years, maybe some big sponsors have fell out, and it's opened up a few qualifying spots in the field for us to slide into. You go to Indy this year, I'm sure the field will be packed. Last year, it was my debut, and we were able to get into the field with a 399. This year, it's probably going to be a 370 bump. It's hard to say, but if you take out a little bit of that corporate money, it lets us come in at the bottom of the field. But like I said, it's a double-edged sword. That corporate money needs to be there. For us, there's not a whole lot good that happens after 800 feet except some big speed. I mean, if anything's going to happen to the car, it's at that end where it's really pulling and it's expiring. But Terry's got a great handle on it. I feel comfortable in the car every time going to the finish line. But if there's anything we can do, not just necessarily to cut corners, but to make it easier on us and to have a little bit of money left in our pocket, mainly just the wear and tear on the engine, then that's what we will do in order to make it to the next round. So it helps us a little bit on expenses, just mainly on our parts. Just gives us a fighting chance.
What's your take on the car counts here in 2021? To your point, it feels like there's some opportunity for guys to slide in and get some show up money, but we haven't seen. I mean, at some of the races, I felt like I looked at the entry list and there was a bunch of names I hadn't seen in a while, or maybe some fresh faces. But I still have been surprised, especially at some of the events, that the car count has been as low as it is. What do you attribute that to, and is there a fix?
I mean, not to get too involved with it. I mean, I think there is a fix, but it all boils down to money. You know, for us to be able to go there, you know, last year or the year before, that, you know, just to show up was a substantial amount of money, and they've cut that. If that gets put back in there, I think more teams will travel. I mean, it takes a lot of these teams $30,000 or $40,000 to just leave the shop, you know, and that's huge. So
what's the qualifying money in Top Fuel right now?
I believe it's $7,500 for a 2-day race or $8,500 for a 3-day race, and that's to qualify. So then I think when you win rounds, it goes up a little bit, but it's just, you know, it's not quite there. The only way we can make it is because we get a volunteer crew that comes from everywhere that half the time pay their own way. You know, so it's just, if you're buying hotel rooms and flights for everybody, you burn up $10,000 very quick just in road money, and you haven't even ran the car yet. So, you know, that expense is pretty big. And I think some of the small fields could have been bigger with just a little bit more money here and there. $2,000 or $3,000 goes a long ways for a low buck guy. You know, if say it was $12,000 or $15,000 to show up, and maybe even say, okay, well, you got to make a hit on Friday and a hit on Saturday, and you'll get 15 grand. I think you would have some pretty full fields at that point. And your bigger races, you know, U.S. Nationals, it's going to be full. Your hot and greasy tracks are better for us and are kind of better for the low buck guy because, you know, not to get into too much here, but
feel free. That's what we're here to do, to get into it.
If they want to slow these cars down some and make it affordable for us and even the playing field. I know they took some traction prep away from it a couple years ago, but you can take a mag away, you can take a clutch disc away, you can lower the fuel pump, lower the blower. It doesn't matter. The big teams are still going to blow it up at 1,000 feet. That's just what it's going to be. It's going to be a consumable part, and that's how far they're going to make it. But if you even the playing field on the track prep, not to a dangerous situation, no means, but whenever they did that a couple years ago, I remember the guys at Schumacher saying, okay, well, now we were getting 3 runs out of the crank, but now we're getting 7 runs out of the crank because it was just less tug on the motor. Make that track a 380 or a 390 track. Now it's awesome to go out there, and every now and then, you know, you want Grubnick or Torrance or somebody to go out there and lay down a 360 at 335. I mean, that's awesome. It's great for the sport. But as a whole, if you're looking to slow them down, whether Goodyear don't want the tire to go fast or whatever the case is, you know, scale it back to a 380, 390 track where it's still safe. People's not going out there and smoking the tires every run because you still need a show for the fans, but it makes it easier for us because we know going in there, okay, well, they're in, say, like Sonoma. They're in Sonoma, the track's 140 degrees. Well, we've got a chance because we know we can go 390 or 395 on that track. We don't go 830, 60 foot. We may go 880, you know, 9 flat. We've got a standing chance. And then I think you'll see your smaller guys start to show up because you don't have to kill your stuff to make the field.
I think I mean, I hope someone's listening. I really do. I feel like this nature of making these engines just consumable, like that's just something we're going to destroy. We're going to blow up 4 of them or whatever. I just think that mindset is largely problematic. And it adds to this whole situation where, man, how much sponsorship dollars, how many partners would you have to really make that ever make sense?
Yeah,
right?
I don't whatever makes sense, whether to me or to my wife or to whoever. But, you know, to run one of these cars, I think, you know, and I don't know the numbers because, you know, I'm not in it enough, but to run it on a full scale, you know, a pro deal, you would have to have $1.5 million to $2 million to even run it. I feel like easily. So it's, you know, it's definitely a balancing act. There'll always be money. It's way cheaper than going and running NASCAR or F1. I mean, the dollar figure is cheaper, but you know, the winning dollar isn't there as well. So it's a money issue, you know, and we got a bunch of hype because we didn't take the heads off of it. And people's like, well, you know, make it the same engine during eliminations. I understand that, but you're going to have catastrophic failure. That $5 part's going to break. That rod bolt's going to break. And you can't end the show for the fans. You can't have a bunch of single runs. You can't have that. Like I said, scale the track prep back a little bit and even the playing field for everybody because like the funny car chaos and the nitro chaos and stuff that Chris Graves does. You have nitro cars, you have alcohol cars, but you're on smaller tracks. No offense to them, but you're on smaller tracks where the prep's not as good. You make it an 8th mile class, a 380, 390, 8th mile deal, and the playing field is equal. But then you go to Dallas and you show up and, Del Worsham comes with a pro car, you can get after it. Good for the sport. We have 64 cars there, stuff like that. But then you go to your smaller tracks, your 8th mile stuff, your grassroots drag racing, and even the playing field at night, it's 11 o'clock and the dew's coming in. It's not a 350, 360 track anymore.
It's such great commentary, man. Thank you, Joey, for joining us, because this is some of the conversations that I think have to be had like out in the open, so that people start to learn, the challenges that someone such as yourself face out here trying to chase the nitro dream. I mean, drag racing, I think without question, the stars and the most prominent vehicles that exist in our sport, the kings of drag racing, Top Fuel and Funny Car. And how can we create an environment? What can we do that is going to rekindle the interest in like getting there someday? Because I think there's a ton of people in the sport of drag racing that have just closed the door on that. They're going, hey, that deal is out of reach. I'll never be able to do that. And that's a real problem. And that's something that, I mean, not maybe right now will we pay that price, but eventually there will be a price to pay for that, because where is the next Joey Haas going to come from? Like, are your children, is your brother or whatever going to aspire to do that? Because it's only going to get worse as we go if some sort of corrective action isn't taken. And I agree. I know that the track prep subject is obviously very touchy and it's polarizing. People get really revved up about it because obviously no one wants to see anyone get hurt. That's without question. But I also am a big fan in looking around and learning. Like they always say that like the kids, if you walk into a daycare, like the kids that are going to become successful and the kids that are going to go on to do incredible things are the ones that notice stuff, right? Like you move the tables to the other side of the classroom and most of the kids don't even know. Like, man, whatever, the chairs moved. But there's a few of those kids that are like, hey, what's going on? And sometimes I think the NHRA are like the kids that aren't paying attention. Do you know what I mean? Like, hey, dude, the chairs moved. Are you guys not looking around? I mean, look at the growth that's happening with No Prep Kings, the growth that's happening with this No Prep movement. We can talk about the competition and the characters all we want, but I think a big part of that is the tracks, the prep. Like it's not a battle of the wallets. It's not a battle of who's willing to burn it up. It's a battle of who can get down there. And I'm not suggesting that Top Fuel and Funny Car go no prep, but some happy medium could be very beneficial.
Yeah. I mean, just like I said.
Shoot, we're losing him. Oh.
And I think the playing field would be equal.
Can you repeat yourself? We lost you for a second.
I think if you just scaled back to a 380, 390 track, the playing field would be equal. It's not going to be dangerous. It's not going to be safe. It would just scale it back just a tiny bit and make it work.
I couldn't agree more, man. Well, I want to ask a little bit about this past weekend at US 131 Motorsports Park. You guys brought out this 1957 Chevy Funny Car that I really think is kind of catching on. I'm a big fan of personalities and characters and whatnot, but every once in a while there's cars that kind of cut through and seem to get people's attention. That 57 Chevy is certainly in the conversation for a car that gets people's attention. Can you take us through a little bit of the US 131 Night of Fire experience this past weekend? We've been raving about it all week on dragillustrated.com and across our social media channels. So great to see these tracks packed to the gills with people. Take us through your experience up at US 131 and how the old 57 treated you.
Well, me and my dad, Joe, we put this car together. It's old man Creasy's car. It's got a 2004 Camaro body on it also, but Dad wanted something, we've been match racing for the last 15 or 20 years, and that's really how we came about. So we kind of know the match racing side of things better than the heads up. So, Dad wanted something match race worthy, and we got this 57 Chevy. And then under the body, it's a scaled back big show deal. It's a dual mag deal, clutch cannon, all valve, command module, all the bells and whistles and stuff like that. We just don't want to run it very hard. But we got this 57 Chevy. I did all of the body work, primed and sanded it a whole bunch, and I didn't lay the color. One of John Lawson's guys at John Lawson Rebuilders in Joliet laid the color. Finally got it done. We just put this thing together in April. So we go out and test one run. Then we go to Eddyville for their Nitro Chaos, make a couple squirts on it. And our first match race was Martin. We go up there, the place is packed. I mean, it's like you said, the pictures are just, we've raced up there for a long time, and Jason does a phenomenal job getting that place, and the facility is awesome. So we get up there, and we hadn't made a quarter-mile hit on this thing yet. And like you said, the car is just out of this world beautiful. Candy color, just house of color. It's awesome. So, you know, we had just went 366 at 226 with it in Eddyville. So this thing we knew was going to fly. Right. So we get up there, and you know, Dad lets it rip off, and we got to still tweaking the bell housing a little early. It's a little lazy early, but it goes 289 to the finish line, and you know, obviously the crowd goes wild because you know it's a 57 Chevy Nitro nostalgia.
It's not supposed to go 290.
No, it's not supposed to. You know, I mean, it's not heritage rules. We understand that. It's an outlaw deal. I mean, there's enough classes with enough rules. I think that's why Chris Graves' deal goes on, because we just want to go out there and run the cars. We want to match race the stuff. We want to have fun doing it affordably. We don't want to put a rack of pistons and a clutch in it every run. Now, it's probably going to get a clutch every run just because of the horsepower of the deal. But so we made that hit. You know, the fans love it. You know, selling a bunch of T-shirts and stuff. Just for what we represent for the American way. You know, my dad's a veteran. He come up with the whole deal. Through John Lawson, that car was originally the quick draw car was supposed to be, and then they repainted that car as the American way, and he had his shop fire and everything got burnt. So when we put this car together, the 57 Chevy, we went to John Lawson and said, well, you know, since the American way never made it to the track, I mean, they had just buffed the clear on it and his shop burnt down, you know, could we run the American way name? And, you know, he gave us the faith to do it. So that's where everything's came from. And it's just, you know, it's what we represent. You know, without all that, we wouldn't be here. And it's just it's an awesome way to show it on display and be patriotic. And it looks good.
Oh, it's phenomenal, man. Speaking of the match race, and please send our thanks to your father for his service. You're exactly right. I mean, I talk about this a lot, but I mean, the men and women coming home from World War II, I mean, we owe a lot of, them everything, but those are the people that end up going drag racing, going car crazy, coming home and working on hot rods and spending their money on race cars. So we owe a huge debt of gratitude in so many different ways to our armed forces. But I'm curious, the match race scene right now feels like it's something of a resurgence there as well. After that event, I mean, or how many match race bookings do you guys pursue? And do you feel like there's a future for you guys to be able to go out and maybe not get rich or whatever, but offset the cost of running that car and going out and having a great time with your dad, racing with your father? I mean, does that opportunity exist for a match racer?
Yeah, I mean, that's mainly kind of how we started. We started in 2005, 2006 was match racing in the Midwest with a Nitro funny car that Justin Grant owned. We created the Stardust car and then the Wonder Wagon, and then we match raced with Tom Moultrie and the Drastic Plastic and stuff. So I feel like in the Midwest, there has always been a match race deal. I think we've always been part of it. We've match raced in Cordova, Illinois for the World Series. We've match raced in Union Grove up there some. Martin, Michigan's been a main one. With Muncie, Indiana. So there has been some match racing. You know, our future that we look at is Eddyville. They have a great Night of Fire show in June and July. And it grows from there. We'll go to Martin, possibly go to Martin in September for the Funny Car Nationals and go to the World Series at the end of the month in Cordova. So for us, if we could run the car 4 or 5 times a year on a match race side of things, you know, it not necessarily pays the bills, but it lets us race and lets us put on a great show. Pete Dove, he's got the Back from Ashes Fuel Altered. Yep. So we'll match race with him some because he's local to us and he shares his shop with us and tools and equipment and stuff. So we'll match race with them and kind of be a little traveling circus and just be able to go out there and not have to beat our stuff up. You know, we do like some heads up stuff, and we will do some heads up stuff here and there. We'll probably do it with the 2004 Camaro body.
We're losing him. Joey, we're losing you.
Maybe that gives us an advantage on track prep and stuff like that. More downforce, you know, ropes up at the end of our pits and stuff like that. Simply, you look at Norfolk.
We're losing you, Joey. There? Yeah, we lost you for a second. Are you there?
Yeah,
I think.
I'm here.
Okay. Real quick, last closing thought. I want to I feel like we got to touch on this briefly before I let you go. You talked right when we started about a volunteer crew that flies in, guys that will spend their own money, right? To go help and be a part of what you're doing. I've said before that we as a sport are so lucky to the passion that exists in this sport. I would argue rivals all others, rivals any others. When you talk about guys that are willing to spend their own money to fly across the country, to work their tails off, chasing the drag racing dream.
Yeah.
We saw that, we see that on display with you, many other teams, but take us through that moment. Speaking of passion and this shared enthusiasm, when you're headed to the final round and the guys that you took out in the first round of eliminations arrive in the pits, Scott Palmer and company, to try to make sure that you guys make it up there for the final round. What was that moment like for you? And I don't know if everybody that's watching along is aware of this, but as you worked your way through the elimination rounds at the Mile High Nationals, very challenging situation, fast turnarounds, challenging situations for a small team. What was that moment like when you look at the end of the pits and here come a flood of men and women to come offer a helping hand?
Well, I mean, like I said before, I think it's cover magazine worthy to have a
I
picture
agree.
in black and white of, I don't even know how much of the car you'd be able to see because that's how many people were there, but of black and white, and question the family of even the big show. Say is it the 1980s or is it 2021? Is it 2030? Where's it going? But wherever it's going or wherever it's been, here's where it is right now. So I get done beating Clay Millican and come back to the pits and round the corner. I mean, I'm in the car. We don't have somebody. I'm in the car towing it back. So we come around the corner, and it's funny because
no one to get in there and sweat for you.
Yeah.
Right.
So Terry, we've came a long ways in the last couple of years with tools and equipment and people. Our toolboxes are to the side. I mean, there's already Palmer's guys are ready. They're ready to go. And we roll in, and it had broke the belt on that run. And me and Palmer and, my guys are over there just thrashing on it. And Palmer's like, well, we got to get a belt on this thing, because I told him we was going to leak it down. And he's like, well, we got to get a belt on it. He's like, you got another belt? And I said, yeah. I said, let me go into the trailer and find it. I said, but it's used, we don't have a new one. And he's like, no. And walks back. We're right next door to him, comes back with a new belt. Here, put it on. We're not taking no chances. And I mean, that's just the way. I
have goosebumps. If anybody was curious, I have goosebumps. These are the stories,
the way that it is. I mean, and that's the way Palmer is. And going back to my guys, we have came a long ways with Terry, with everybody involved. I feel like we could have, made a turnaround, but Palmer's guys were there to help us also, because it takes everything we got and then some. We had a rack of pistons there ready, we had a clutch there ready, and we were ready to, to put up a fight. So it all worked out good, and Palmer's guys, they're some of the best.
Scott Palmer is a hero for the sport of drag racing. That's really what he is.
Absolutely.
Across the board. This is a guy that's a fantastic ambassador for our sport and deserves any success and all the success that has come his way. He absolutely deserves it, man.
Yeah.
And it's a wild thing, man. And I know that I feel blessed because this is a sport, like I said, where the goodwill, so many of the things that happen in our sport. I mean, and this is, Tom Bogner in the comments right here from Lucas Oil, I think he will attest to this. There are tons of sponsorships that happen out of the kindness of people's hearts. There is just out of a willingness and a desire to support others that share the passion and share the enthusiasm for our sport. There are events that are put on just to provide people a place to race. I mean, there's so much goodwill on display in our sport. It's almost unbelievable, to be honest, man. And we're excited to see all the success that you're having, Joey. It's great to see a fresh face on the scene in Top Fuel. And it's also cool to see this resurgence for match racing, man. So congratulations on all your success. Again, thank you to your father, and thank you for your time here today. I look forward to talking to you again soon.
I appreciate it. I appreciate what you've done. I mean, the Drag Illustrated thing, everything's been a stepping stone, and with Scott Palmer, I mean, touching back on that subject, we go to Eddyville and run that Nitro Chaos, and Palmer's pitting next to us after Denver, we stay over in their pit more than our pit. And then we go to Martin, and guess what? Palmer's in the pit next to us.
Scott Palmer's there.
Yeah, I mean, if I can relate to anybody, if I could pick out anybody like that, it's Palmer. I mean, because at the end of the day, he's still going to be racing. It's what he loves to do. He's not a cookie cutter driver. He's not a robot. He's great when he needs to be. He'll slip up, because he's not perfect. But he's there, and he's doing it, and he's not going to give up. And that's how I relate our crew. And, I feel like we've got a core team.
There's no doubt, brother. There's no doubt. I appreciate you being here. Who knows? Maybe that photo will end up on the cover of Drag Illustrated. I know some guys that know some guys that know some guys. So thank you, dude. Seriously, a ton for being here, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks, brother. All right, I'm going to bring you back. Murder Tundra, what's cracking, dude? Dude, don't you love talking about, I'm telling you, these stories of the thrashes, anybody who's ever drag raced, you want things to go well. You really do. And you don't want any trouble. You don't want any hiccups. But man, is it fun when you have those moments where it's everybody diving in, trying to get this thing put back together. Those are the stories you tell. You don't tell people, you don't tell your grandkids or your buddies at the bar about the time everything went perfect at the racetrack. You tell them about the time everything that could have went wrong.
I've got lots of those stories too.
Yeah, you may be the best ever at putting those stories together. But hey, man, we're 51 minutes through the show. Fantastic so far. I really do. We don't do a ton. I don't know that we have shine as much of a light on nitro racing, match racing, and stuff on this show as I would like to be honest. I talked about this last night actually on Cocktails with the Carusos, that so often, and this happens in every walk of life, but especially in the media business, that you kind of go the path of least resistance, right? A lot of times you ring the phones of the guys you know real well, or the guys you know who are going to answer.
Easier to talk to because you've talked to them a million times.
Easy to talk to, easy to interview, and you know some guys that you can pull some quotes out of, and you can get some guys to participate.
Joey sounds like that guy.
What?
Joey sounds like that guy.
Yeah, Joey's that guy. Yeah, Joey's one of those guys now. But it's tough, and I'm glad. And I'm going to give Joey a little plug. We didn't get to talk about this. We talked about this before we went live, but I do think I challenge racers, be more like Joey. Be willing to put yourself out there. I'm going to be honest. I don't know how this dude got my phone number. I don't even know how he got a hold of me, to be honest. I think he sent me an email. Actually, I know he did. He sent me an email and just said, hey, we had a hell of a weekend out in Denver, and I'd love to talk to you about it. And, give my team some love for what we accomplished. And so few people will make that, to take that action, right? They just expect Fox to call them. I think they think TMZ is going to show up one day, and it's just going to happen. But Joey took action, and that is so important. I wrote a book about this, and it's available on Amazon.com, and we send it out for free all the time. But racers, you have to be willing to promote yourself, and it's tough to do because we operate in a sport that, as we have spent the last hour lamenting, is full of great guys and great gals and people that are the salt of the earth, humble, kind, generous folks. Almost too humble, right? Almost too soft-spoken, almost problematically polite, right? Because they just don't want to be that guy. They don't want to come off as an arrogant jerk, and they don't want to be boisterous and obnoxious. But I challenge you.
They put so much time into this too. So
be proud of it. Be proud of it.
All half the week and all weekend. Now they're traveling back, trying to get to work. I mean, that comes into it too, where now it's too late. Now I'm getting ready for the next race. I haven't even really turned around and kind of tooted my horn on my last race.
It's true. And I encourage all of you, reach out, not just to us, right? There's a lot of drag racing media outlets. There's podcasts popping up left and right. And I encourage you to be willing to celebrate your successes. It doesn't make you obnoxious. It doesn't make you arrogant to be proud of what you and your team have accomplished. And it takes being willing to stick your neck out there a little bit. It takes being willing to be interviewed. And I just encourage more people to follow kind of follow the lead of those racers out there like Joey Haas, who are willing to put themselves out there, do the interview in the middle of the afternoon or whatever, even though they have work to do or whatever else. If you want to elevate your racing career, you've got to be a promoter. You have to, I believe in 2021, if you're in business, you're in show business. It's just the way of the world now with the media landscape as it is. If you're in business, you're in show business. And I encourage you to put on your hat, put on your cape, man, and yell and scream a little bit, man. So with that said, let's bring on the one and only, this is kind of long overdue, getting Lyle on the show here. And I'm very excited about it. Let me get my artwork queued up here. I'm trying to make this a little sexier. What's going on, Lyle Barnett? Welcome to the show.
What's up, guys? JT, you're not any prettier than the last time I saw you.
Man,
Nothing's changed there.
I texted him. I asked him if he had those headphones hooked into a sweet Walkman.
I'd say he's got him plugged into a Discman.
Yeah.
Oh, you gotta see his setup.
Yeah. I'm not quite as old as you, JT.
No, neither of us are. Just for a little
reminder.
Right
Man.
there. No, yeah, there's not either of us are as old
Just
as
for
you
men's
are.
working good on that beard, though.
Is it? Because it's getting going great.
Oh, Lyle, man,
shit.
thank you for joining us this afternoon. Obviously, there's a lot to talk about when it comes to Lyle Barnett. You've got your hands in a lot of different things, working at Modern Racing, competing and winning quite regularly behind the wheel of the Beer Money Mustang on the no prep small tire scene, but also earning your Pro Mod stripes out on the NHRA Pro Mod Drag Racing Series trail behind the wheel of the Elite HP, Mac Fab wheels, late model Camaro, Pro Charged Hot Rod. We can talk a little bit about Pro Mod here in a second, but I want to touch on Cash Days this past weekend, Shady Side Dragway. I love these nitty gritty little 8th mile drag strips. Who did you ever think, coming off of Horsepower Wars, the reality TV program put on by our buddies at Power Auto Media, James Lawrence and company, did you ever think that competition, that reality show competition, would provide you with a car that you're out winning $10,000 like every time I turn around at every small tire race on the East Coast?
I had visions of taking this thing and like making it something cool and using it to go out and have fun and stuff. Did I think that we were going to end up small tire no prep racing and racing for 10,000, 20,000? I mean, a few weeks ago we raced for 68,000. No, I didn't. I didn't think I would race on No Prep Kings with it. I didn't think I would end up on Netflix with it and be winning cash days all over the Southeast. But we've managed to do it. The show, we won the car plus 10 grand when we were on the show to begin with. So the very first race the car ever won, it won 10 grand. And obviously, to win, if you win Horsepower Wars, traditionally you get to keep the car. Now season 2, we went to the final, but everybody got to keep their car because of that unfortunate incident with the hauler catching on fire, and that's another rabbit hole. But we started out running that thing on radios, and had visions of breaking stock block records and with the LS and doing stuff like that, and that super lightweight cars and guys that are literally willing to just blow the guts out of one every run have stretched that record way beyond my means. So when the no prep thing kind of started, gaining traction and doing its thing, I told Pete, I said, dude, we're kind of out to lunch as far as the radial tire stuff is concerned with this thing, because in reality, it makes 1,300 or 1,400 and weighs 3,000 pounds because it's all steel and all glass, has an 850 cage in it, and it just really doesn't need to go that fast. So we kind of put our heads down and went after the no prep stuff. And Pete is just unbelievable when it comes to his tuning abilities. And
Pete Harrell Engine and Dyno, for those that aren't tuned in to the Pete that Lyle's talking about. And I'm curious, Lyle, now granted, I would hang a lot of the success of Beer Money on Pete Harrell. Yeah. He's a very well-known guy. If you're a hardcore Doorslammer enthusiast, he maybe doesn't have the name power of Steve Petty or Jamie, right, some of these, but he is a super tuner out here in in drag racing across the board. I'm curious, two things that I want to kind of touch on. Obviously, a lot of the success is owed to Pete, yourself, the group of guys that work on that car. But don't you find it somewhat inspiring that you've got a car that makes 1,300 horsepower and did I hear you correctly, has a stock block LS in it, and has real glass in it, weighs 3,000 pounds, has like some weld drag lights on it or something, or those might be Walmart drag lights. I'm not sure. But do you know what I mean? How inspiring is it to see a car like that racing at the level you're racing? Because I mean, would you agree that anybody could afford to have a car? Anybody with a job willing to get their hands dirty could have a race car like that.
Yeah, and that's kind of the idea behind the car as we move forward, even is make it relatable. A lot of the racing that I've done my entire career, and all thanks to, my dad and everybody that's been behind me. Tommy Kirk was a huge part, who owns MacFab Beadlocks, a huge part of the early parts of my career. A lot of the racing that you've known me to do, that JT's known me to do, and maybe a lot of the fans, is really not relatable in the fact that it's out of reach for most people. And, and not to say that there aren't successful people out there, and everybody does as good as they can do and affords what they can afford and manages to make it day to day. But, to compete at the level that I've been competing at up until now, and even now as well, is really just out of reach for the majority of people. It's just financially, it's a huge burden, and it's just not something that everybody can do. So the idea behind Beer Money, and even moving forward, is make it relatable to most people who are interested in drag racing as a whole. Because yeah, you're right. That thing, you could rebuild it and run just as fast and do just as much with it for about $40,000. I would say $40,000 to $50,000. You have a mid to high 4-second capable LS powered Fox body, and that's doable. That's doable for most. And it would really the idea, and what we try to keep in mind, even as we make upgrades to this thing, that we keep it, that look, it has a spirit about itself. I think
it does, man.
I'm
glad to hear you say that.
And it's something that, that even kids, like, I love going to the racetrack and these kids come up and say, yeah, my dad had one and he sold it, but we recently bought one, and you've inspired, Beer Money's inspired us to build a turbo LS Mustang, and I'm like, dude, do it. Like, you can, and don't shoot to run, because I'll tell you, Beer Money is a high 4-second car, no prep, it doesn't matter. It's a high 4-second player, and you don't have to, that's maybe a little bit far-fetched, because we do turn the guts out of that thing, and Pete does extremely well on the keyboard. So we've really got it sorted out, but very easily a mid 5-second car can be built for that kind of money. And I've been approached several times, Wes, asking, I want to buy it, and what would you sell it for? And the first person to ask me was Al Boogie, that drives Honcho on Street Outlaws, and I'm like, fuck, man, I don't know, like 80,000 is what I told him. I literally told him $80,000 for Beer Money, and he considered it. And I was like, dude, if he shows up tomorrow with $80,000, I'm either going to have to kick him in the nuts and run or take it.
You may have to take it.
And I wouldn't sell it for 160.
Yeah, I know you wouldn't.
The sentimental value of that car to me, like, Doug Cook and I talked about this yesterday. Shout
out to our buddy Doug Cook at Motion Raceworks. Yes. For those that don't know, Doug's a very well-known guy.
Huge sponsor of mine. It does anything I'm interested in, he is 100% behind, and it's awesome to be backed by that company who is growing at an unbelievably rapid rate. But I told Doug yesterday, I said, Beer Money and I are one. Like, we are one being, and if we show up to the racetrack, we're there to contend, and more than likely have something that can go to the finals and win a race. If I show up at a no prep event, and going back to what we started the conversation on, is all along keeping it relatable to somebody, a young kid that walks up, him and his dad, has been super important to us. And it is a stock block. It's got really good stuff on it, which we have been blessed with great sponsors. In reality, the engine is worth over half of what the car itself is worth. So,
right.
But it was just super important for us to keep it relatable to families. And
I almost feel like it's something of, and I don't mean what I'm about to say, I don't mean to like fire shots at anybody, but if you look at like some of the cars that have built some of these really prominent YouTube channels, like Cletus McFarland's YouTube following is unbelievable. His following in general is unbelievable. But if you look across, like, you go dial up 1320 video, you pay attention to any of those different kind of content creators on YouTube, the stuff's pretty exotic, right? And I thought about that before. I'm like, man, this is all fantastic. But if I'm a kid mowing yards this summer and every video on YouTube's about a twin turbo Dodge Viper or a twin turbo Lambo, right? Or some big crazy exotic thing, that feels to me, speaking of kicking the nuts, like that just feels like something that would take the wind out of someone's sails. And I thought to myself before, like, how valuable would it be to the sport of drag racing to see a car like yours, get that kind of coverage and get that kind of support and be celebrated to the level that some of these other really exotic, really out of control, crazy builds get? Because what you guys are doing, there are kids mowing yards this summer, getting ready to graduate high school and go have their first job and, low overhead. Maybe they still live with their parents. They're not married yet. They don't have any kids and they've got a little bit of extra bread at the end of the month. They could aspire to do this. They could have a car like Beer Money. And I wonder to myself, what would that do for the growth of our sport?
Dude,
It's important to see stuff like that and realize that you don't have to have a new Bickle Pro Mod.
Nope.
You don't have to have, a car like Andrew Alepa would show up with at Donald Long's events, like a state-of-the-art C7 Corvette with the latest, greatest Proline motor to get attention. You can go out and do it with a car that's most of the ductwork looks like it's made out of beer cans.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And will continue to be so. But, and as sad as it is, you've got these very successful, businessmen and stuff that have built these brand new Jerry Bickle Pro Mods and got $225,000 Pat Musey 959s in them and, $40,000 worth of lockup transmissions and another $20,000 worth of converters, and all the spare parts and stuff. And they show up to the racetrack. And by the time they pull in the gate, if you dollar valued what's sitting there, you're probably $2 million. I mean, I would say on average, $1.5 million, probably.
I think that's fair.
At least, counting rig and all. With me, I'm sitting in the truck I pull Beer Money to the track with, a 2012 F-250. I've got a triple axle enclosed trailer that looks almost as bad as Beer Money itself. And when I roll in the gate, like I'm a very small fraction or percentage of that. And I race for the same money. Like you think about
and win
with the exception of your race, the World Doorslammer Nationals at Orlando, and a handful of other, I guess, prestigious pro mod races, that they're racing for less than $10,000 every week, period. And literally. I can take Beer Money, for instance. I went to Darlington NPK 2 weeks ago and won small tire, $7,500 to win. I went last weekend to Carolina Cash Days by Corey Stamper and the Buff Boys at Shadyside Dragway, $10,000 to win. I'm on the heel. I'm literally, when we get off, I'm throwing everything in the dogs in my truck and we're headed to my lake house in North Georgia. So I'll be on vacation this weekend, but and I'm kicking myself in the ass for this. $10,000 Friday night at Farmington Dragway, small tire, no prep. $10,000 Saturday, Pageland Dragway, small tire, no prep. $3,500 to win Sunday, Union Dragway, small tire, no prep. So you're talking about anywhere from $20,000 to $25,000 worth of small tire, no prep races this weekend in North Carolina, two in South Carolina, all within 2 hours of my house that I'm missing. Next weekend, Wilkesboro Dragway, an hour and a half behind me back here. If they get 128 cars, $80,000 to win small tire, no prep. 80.
How much?
80,000 if they get 128 cars. So I assume we're going to be racing for 40 grand. So it's honestly, Wes, it's don't get me wrong. I love NHRA Pro Modified. I love driving a Pro Modified car. Nothing beats the speed. Nothing beats the competition. Nothing beats the stage. It's prestigious. Nothing beats it. It is the pinnacle of Doorslammer drag racing. It's what every Tom, Dick, and Harry dreams of doing. It's what I dreamed of doing, and I love it. But when you sit back and think about what we're doing here, like I can take beer, just like I told you, in a 2-month span, I can race for well over $100 grand with a $40,000 car. And so just like
you would literally have to win every race, like the World Doorslammer Nationals included, and you'd still be upside down.
Correct. And I am in the green racing the Beer Money Mustang as I'm sitting here right now. I'm in the green, definitely all time, but big time this year. You know, I've won 7 races this year for a total of, I did the math the other day, like $22,000 or something, you know, and for 12,000 of that's been in a 1 week span, you know. And so like, and me and my dad were talking about this, you know, like, God, financially, we're just idiots to race anything but beer money, you know, but you know, obviously we love what we do. And I'm very fortunate to have been given the opportunities to do what I've done. And we're going to run the rest of the season in Pro Modified. I hope to run Pro Modified as long as it exists in the NHRA, you know, but beer money is going to continue to be raced probably 3 or 4 times as much.
I'm curious, as someone who's out here, you know, speaking of being on the scene a couple weeks ago at No Prep Kings when they rolled into Darlington Dragway there in South Carolina, I'm curious, I mean, when you experience places like that and you see those crowds and you know about, I mean, you're obviously very savvy with all this stuff, and you know the TV show is bonkers, right? Killer ratings. Everybody knows these guys. You see, I'm sure you hear about all the merch they sell and all these different things. As someone who's trying to, you know, aspires to make their living drag racing, Lyle, how hard is it to turn a blind eye to what's happening with No Prep Kings? Because Murder Tundra and I had this conversation. Let's bring Murder Tundra back because he doesn't always like to be on here, but I think we're going to need him for this particular conversation. I'm curious, Murder Tundra, you know, we've talked about this in the past. If we were, Lyle, if somebody gave us, if Red Bull called, if Monster Energy called and said, hey, we want to get involved in drag racing, you tell us where we can go, you know, where's the best opportunity for you and the best opportunity for us? Gosh darn it, I don't think I'm going to say NHRA Top Fuel. I don't. I think I'm going to say
1,000%
No Prep
Kings. Absolutely.
Yeah, No Prep Kings.
It is. I mean, and I'll just go ahead and tell you, I'm in talks with, not going to mention any names, but I'm in talks with some big companies, you know, specifically related to the performance aftermarket on finishing the car that my dad and I bought several years ago that was going to go into radial racing. And we're having serious talks about putting it together and going after that, for the simple fact that it is the hottest thing going in drag racing right now. I don't care what anybody says. You know, Donald Long may not ever let me back in the gate at South Georgia Motorsports Park for saying that, but it is the hottest thing going. I mean, it was at Darlington, it was 95 degrees. Heat with the heat index, it felt like 106. And you couldn't stir them with a stick. They were, I mean, every 5 minutes over the radio, it was, hey, we need a medic here. We got one out. Hey, we need a medic here. We got one out. People are falling out, passing out, but they are in the stands watching every round until the very final round. People crowding down to the starting line after Robin Roberts won against Kai Kelly in the final. I mean, it's unbelievable. I've never experienced it. I went with Daddy Dave once 2 years ago to Bristol and just didn't really pay attention to you know, the massive crowd and all that. But I really paid attention this time, being on the starting line and running small tire. And it was unbelievable. I mean, they're involved. They know what's going on. They're in the pits, lines around the corner from Ryan Martin's trailer and Kai Kelly's trailer and Murder Nova's trailer, you know, like, I mean, unbelievable. I was parked in the weeds, you know, like way down there, you know, like you needed an Uber to get to the starting line. And it was just unreal. I mean, I sold plenty of merchandise of my own, you know, all I have is some beer money t-shirts, but I had people walking to the other end of the racetrack to buy beer money t-shirts, you know, and people there knew who I was, you know, had watched the Netflix show and stuff. And I agree. If somebody called me tomorrow and said, we want to get in, you know, they weren't involved in drag racing, but they want to start with a fresh program, that's where I would go.
I mean, and could you, I mean, now granted, one of the things that I've had some conversations, you know, off the record with different guys from the industry, you know, that deal, it's definitely getting out there, right? I mean, we saw Lizzie Musey debut that brand new, like super state of the art, badass steel roof and quarters, essentially a pro mod car with steel roof and quarters, killer Pat Musey piece, you know, probably the best engine known to man. And then you look at Ryan Martin's car, you look at, you know, Justin Swanstrom's car. These aren't backyard builds anymore. And no. I don't know how you necessarily rein that in or put that rabbit back in the hat.
They've already had to rein it in once, you know, really.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
What's your take on that, Lyle? Just as somebody that is very technically savvy and, you know, understand the mechanics of these things, is there any way to curtail or prolong that? I think maybe it's inevitable, but is there any way to prolong the lifespan of what we're talking about here?
I say no because I had a hand and was very involved in Justin Swanstrom's build, Little Country's build. It came to our shop as a roller, and we turnkeyed that thing, and I saw every step and really got to look that thing over and know what's in it and what it took to build it. And and they are pro mods with stock wheelbase plus or minus a couple inches, and steel roofing quarters, just like you said. That's exactly what they are. So to reel it back in, I don't want to say it's too far gone, but I'm afraid it's too far gone. I think there is a possibility, and just like radio racing, you just can't keep creating classes. It just kind of gets watered down, and I think they've got a pretty good thing going right now with the Future Street Outlaws and then the Invitational. But at some point, you are going to see it start to, the money is already taken over, but you're going to start seeing the bottom feeders fall off, and it kind of turn into Radio versus the World. I'll tell you what's keeping some of that out is that they don't turn the clocks on. A number on a scoreboard is the most dangerous thing to a heads up drag racing class that there's ever been.
That's what we were just talking about.
That Radio versus the World, the top tier of radio racing, ridiculous how fast they are. Daniel Ferris went 349, just unbelievable. But that 3.4, I don't care if it was 9 with a bunch of 9s, and it may have been that. I think it was a 9.7 or 9.6 or whatever it was. But that 3.4 anything, nail in the coffin for Radio versus the World. 100%. I mean, they're a 1,000 or 100th away from Frankie Taylor's all-time Doorslammer record in the 8. And that's like Radio versus the World is over. It's done. There's anybody that was kind of teetering around the bottom and just kind of hanging out, is like, screw that. It takes more manpower and more parts to compete in Radio versus the World than it does in Pro Boost. And the same cars just swap back and forth. Daniel Ferris can go 349 on radio, shove the big tires on it, and go in Pro Boost trim and go run high 350s, week in and week out. So they've got, either way to go. Some of these guys that have dedicated their build strictly to Radio versus the World are screwed. Unless they can have the means and the funds to go send that thing back to whatever chassis shop built it and have it changed over to big tire. But the worst thing for a heads up class is the scoreboard. Now, it's also what keeps the fans interested and stuff. They want to see that big number pop up. But on the flip side, in Street Outlaws, No Prep Kings, there is no scoreboard. It's just a win light, and the fans love it. Now, they're on the Discovery Channel, and that makes a difference as well.
It's true. They're relating to the drivers before they take off.
Right. And they have a story that they've told about them, and you kind of know some backstory on them, and that makes it interesting. And then getting to go interact with them at the racetrack and stuff,
That's a really good observation. And we do talk about the scoreboards a lot here on the show, but I think it scares people off. Like, it just runs people off before they even get started. It demonstrates the gap. Like, nothing proves the point, or nothing demonstrates the gap between the haves and the haves not more than that scoreboard. That's right. And when those numbers show up, I do think there are certain guys that just shut the trailer door, right? Mm-hmm. Or they look for something else to do with their time. And you know what? I think that is something that I hadn't totally wrapped my head around as it relates to No Prep Kings. Because if we all saw these cars running, and I'm not saying they are, but if the scoreboards were lighting up 368, 372, or whatever, I think it'd be game over. It would definitely accelerate this. How much do you think the no prep in general, just the fact that I've had conversations with Jim Hughes, dear friend of mine, someone who's involved with the rule making and kind of the competition aspect of the No Prep King series. And we talked about how the notion that any of these cars can knock the tires off. I mean, we saw it happen to Lizzie Musey, a really unfortunate incident with her car that she thankfully walked away from. But any one of these cars can knock the tires off pretty much at any point down through there. I hear all the rumblings about how good the track gets throughout the day, and I'd love to hear your perspective on that. But do you believe that no prep situation? I mean, is that more of it's kind of a weird pun or whatever, but like, is that more the secret sauce to this stuff than a lot of people want to realize or want to admit?
Yeah, and I know how fast those cars are going. And it would blow your mind. Honestly, it blew. I didn't believe it until I saw it, for myself. The problem, so the track prep deal, you hear it all the time. The fans don't know any different. No prep. They don't, but it's the guys who know just enough. And I call them, and like everybody else, keyboard warriors that come on there and talk all the trash about, it's not really no prep. Oh, it's not really no prep. Well, the problem now is they're so fast that if you start taking track prep away, you're not going to have any cars left to race. Right. They are going to wreck all up over the place. Like you can't. So you got to leave it alone at this point, unless you're going to scale it way back, take a bunch of power from these guys and truly scrape the racetracks down to absolutely nothing and make them race. Now, I will tell you, I've experienced it for the first time on small tires at the Darlington race just a couple weeks ago. And it looks like it's got a bunch of rubber, and it did have a bunch of rubber, but it was so flipping hot. The track was pretty tricky. Like, we still went fast, but I was over a tenth off of how fast I can usually run on a surface like that because it was so hot and greasy and the track was pretty slick. So there's variations in the track prep, depending on where they are and weather conditions, just like anywhere else.
Right.
The time of the year, the condition of the air, all those things play a factor into how fast these cars go. But as far as what we talked about before is there any reeling them back in, really the track prep at this point, without making them spend a bunch of money, is the only way to do it. The downside of that is it makes it unsafe. And I just don't think that's the smart move. That's something that collectively as an entire group and a whole program, they are going to either have to just continue on or agree that, hey, we're going to have to slow this thing down a little bit and go a different direction.
And who cares if they have a little bit of track prep? Like,
right.
As long as we don't have to sit and watch the tractor go up and down the track.
That's exactly right. And that
track over and over. And over.
And I was going to hit on that next. That's one thing that I've really enjoyed about going slick tire racing. I haven't been on a radial in over a year. The Dart's been down. The Jason Digby on Tooth Jerker has been down after a catastrophic engine failure caused by some faulty manufactured parts. That's the nicest way to put it. And we're still waiting on that to be resolved. And unfortunately, has put us out of commission for over a year. So I've been slick tire racing. And that's one thing, JT, that I've really enjoyed is that these shows like Carolina Cash Days, an entire 32 car field, 5 rounds of eliminations completed in 4.5 hours. Wow. The fans at Carolina Cash Days saw an entire race in 4.5 hours.
That's awesome.
You can't get an entire round of qualifying in,
right.
1 round of qualifying in at a big time radio race anywhere,
yes.
Anywhere on the planet. Like it ain't happening. And the same thing with even at the level of the NHRA. Granted, they prep the track, but it's not as intensive of a track prep when you're talking about slicks. And instead of 7 out of 10 not going down the racetrack, 8 or 9 out of 10 do go down the racetrack on a slick. Mm-hmm. And like in the beer money, that's what's so fun, is that when we go to the starting line 9 out of 10 times, I guarantee you that car will make the trip. And you take a top level or even any radio car to any racetrack at any given time, and that's just not the case.
Right.
And unfortunately, over the years, when radio racing first came around, we didn't overpower the racetracks as bad. Now it takes just unbelievably good track prep to have a race. And it's caused the bigger money teams to really stand out because they have the most horsepower, and they can use it all. Mm-hmm. And so, and I know Tyler Crossnow, Jimmy Bradshaw, Wade down at Bradenton. There's a lot of these guys that make their living. Kurt Johnson on prep and racetracks, but the radial prep has single-handedly killed radial racing. 100%. Like, I don't care what anybody
there
says.
have been times I remember, and I say this from a place of love. I don't mean anything, but I remember when we put Cale and Cody Crisp on the cover of Drag Illustrated magazine, and as two young men that I believe were impacting the future of drag racing. Like, they were impacting our sport with what they were doing. And I look back on that and I almost go like, I don't regret it. But it just, that is really a landmark happening. They brought about this notion of this traveling prep kind of business, right? These people that were going to travel the world prepping these racetracks. And I think it created a wave of these these guys that made, like you said, made a living promoting these race or prepping these racetracks. And it's fantastic. And thank God for all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
I don't think, but damn, it really did change everything. I mean, it changed radial racing. It changed pro mod racing. I remember when the Traction Twins were on the scene in the ADRL, at the height of the ADRL, you would have guys literally, they couldn't put enough power to it. I mean, at that time, you had, especially like nitrous cars and stuff like that, shaking the damn doors off those things every time they let off the button or let off the clutch pedal. And because they just couldn't get enough to get down those super sticky racetracks. And now we're at a point where, and I've seen it many, many times, you know, a guy that's used to race an NHRA shows up to like test at a PDRA race or something like that. That thing, no chance. Because you know what I mean? Like, and you're going to get way lost if you try to set the car up to run on that track, and then you're going to go to Brainerd next weekend. You may as well keep it in the trailer.
That's exactly
because it's
right.
just a different planet. And I get it. I understand the desire to go faster. I totally understand it. But at the same time, it feels like we almost need to protect racers from themselves to a certain extent, because they're going to sacrifice anything for 100th or 1,000th. And in a lot of ways, the quality of our show as a sport has been diminished dramatically by the amount of time that goes into prepping the racetrack. And I think that's a fantastic point. And it actually is a great, like, kind of way to circle back around to what the topic of the show today is one night only, these big thrill show type of deals, the no prep kings kind of style of you come in and you're going to watch a whole race start to finish in one night. I think drag racing needs more of that, man. I really do. Our attention span as a society has never been shorter than it is right now.
Yeah, and I think one of the best examples of that, and has been one for many, many years, and I don't know why more tracks and organizations haven't caught on, but it's the Big Dog Shootout at Piedmont Dragway the first Thursday of every month. For as long as I can remember, I've been going to Piedmont Dragway dreaming of running Big Dog there on a Thursday night and see an entire race in about 4 or 5 hours, just like I talked about the Carolina Cash Days this past weekend. You know, and they continue to do that. Now it's an 8-car qualified field, so you only have 3 rounds of eliminations, but you still get to see an entire race, you know, and good racing, you know, in one night on a Thursday night, you know. And these races take 3 and 4 and sometimes 5 days to complete, you know, and it's just, I mean, it's a freaking marathon, you know, and at some point, you know, people are going to get tired of that. You know, they're like you said, their attention span is short. They want to kind of do something for a few days and then move on and do something else, you know, and I think that we're going to have to backtrack here a little bit at some point and figure out a different way of doing things, you know. And Pete Harrell, I think, has one of the best ideas I've heard in maybe my entire life is radial race from January to May and September to November. Any month in between that, slick tires only. You have to run a slick June, July, and August. And think about what you could fix, right? We wouldn't have to wait all day long to start racing at 8 or 9 o'clock at night. No, get your ass in the lanes at 1 o'clock in the afternoon and let's make some rips and then go into the night. Or if you're good enough, when the track comes around in the afternoon, stick your radials back on. Or just make it slicks all the time. But take radial racing away from June through August.
I'm curious, Lyle, do you think that that's happening almost like without permission? Because right now, like, what are the biggest... I remember a couple of years ago, I had a conversation with Jason Carter and Mark Mickey, and I can't remember how many... Jason sent me an Excel spreadsheet of all the races they could run that year. And this was when NMCA had Radial Wars. Donald Long's got 3 races a year. Tyler Crossnow was putting on his event. At that time, I believe it was still in Memphis. You had Yellow Bullet. I don't know if I already said that. A slew of other ones. And I think it was 21 or 22 big-time radial tire events. And that's been, 3-4 years ago, maybe longer. I'm curious. I mean, I don't even know that I'm aware of that many, like, marquee radial races outside the confines of South Georgia Motorsports Park and what Donald Long does.
Nope. And I think radial racing has just lost some traction. And I think partly, and maybe a lot of the cause of that is no prep racing like we talked about earlier. But I also think, and you're starting to see it kind of trickle down into the no prep stuff, and I'm afraid what we saw happen in radial racing could potentially happen there. But when you start paying these big purses, and I've argued with people until I was blue in the face that huge purses, while they're great for something that is going to last a long time, and you want something to continue into the future for years to come, big purses are bad. And they're bad because it kills the little guy that puts on your local races and stuff around home that pays $2,500. When Donald Long pays $100,000 to win 2 times a year, pays $50,000 to win the other 2 times a year, you've got some $10,000, $20,000, $25,000 shootouts throughout the year. People just save their stuff and go to those. You have to run so fast now and push your stuff so hard. You can't afford to race 21 times a year anymore. Not your everyday dude, right? And I would say most of your radial racers, and even some of your, bottom level or lower level pro mod racers are day-to-day workers that have an 8 to 5 job, and they use their vacation time to go race. They can't afford to run that many times a year anymore. So they save their stuff up in hopes to hit the home run. Right. And you're starting to see that a little bit in no prep, and I'm guilty of chasing the bigger money, but the big money, and I consider it anywhere. If they guarantee $5,000, I'll go. $5,000, $7,500, $10,000 and up, I'm there.
That was one of the things I really liked about what Jason Ruckert from VP Race Fuels, kind of like everybody's best buddy in the drag racing world, what they were doing with limited drag radial. And I don't know if this is still the case, but I know that there was like a gentleman's agreement, essentially, that they were going to race for $5,000.
Yeah, and that's still the case.
Okay, look at the longevity of limited drag radial and how long this class has been going on.
It's growing
because you're not piquing the interest of a Kevin Rivenbark, right? You're not piquing the interest of a Jason Harris or a Jim Halsey necessarily that's going to show up and crush everybody, right? And has the resources and the know-how to do it. So I think there's a great point there, Lyle, and I got to be honest, Murder Tundra and I have had this conversation before, that there have been times that I have told him that I almost halfway felt bad about putting on the first ever World Series of Pro Mod and paying $100,000 to win, because I thought, man, I don't know that we did. I'm very proud of it. You know what I'm saying? I'm super proud of it. And we actually had this conversation. I did the math. You do the math every once in a while. Do you ever catch yourself like doing the math?
Yeah.
And on just different things in life, how much you spend on golf, how much you spend on beer, how much you spend on racing. And I did the math. Yeah, lots on beer.
Lots on the beer.
Lots on beer.
That's why I collect the beer money. That's the reason I'm sitting here, man.
Yeah, right.
I'm in this office for beer money.
Yeah, that's exactly right, man. And it's like I look back on how much money we've paid out at Drag Illustrated, and it's over $1 million in the last 5 years that we've wrote checks to racers, and I'm super proud of it. Yep. But a bulk of it has been $100,000 to win Pro Mod in Denver for 3 years, $50,000 to win Pro Mod the last 2 years in Orlando, $75,000 to win Pro Stock the last 2 years in Orlando, and I start to think like, man, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Like, I'm very proud of it. And I think those events have to, like, if we're ever going to get the sport of drag racing where I want it to go, big money. Yeah,
that's exactly right. Yeah. That's a good point. What I was going to say is Pro Mod that deal is totally different from what I was referring to, in the fact that Pro Mod racers are just that. They are Pro Mod racers, and most of them are pretty loyal to their region, I would say. Like, I think that's true. Your Northeast Pro Mod guys are going to race Northeast Pro Mod whether they pay $1 or $1 million. True. And your Midwest Pro Mod guys, your PDRA guys, your Carolina Extreme Pro Mod guys, they're going to race there, and they're going to do their thing no matter what. And you could pay $100,000, you could pay $50,000, you could pay $500,000 for the World Doorslammer Nationals or whatever. You're still going to get
those guys,
majority, the same guys that are going to come up and mainly because it's a quarter-mile event and it's kind of its own deal. Radial racing is so broad. Like people from California drive all the way across the country to South Georgia Motorsports Park to run a Duck X Productions event. And it's just those are two totally different things, I think. And I don't think if you definitely didn't do it any harm. I think it's great. It's once a year that you're baddest of the bad quarter-mile drag racers show up in one spot. They battle it out for one race, and that's it for the year. Like, all right, we're just going to go race our normal stuff for the rest of the year. Catch you on the flip side. Next year we'll do it again in Orlando. The problem that I'm talking about is 3, 4, 5, 6 races a year that pay right. If you did it 5 times a year, a problem.
Yes,
100% a problem. And just like we can even speak on Dig or Die, which was just a few weeks ago. They advertised 200 cars, ridiculous, 100,000 to win. And there was this huge blow up about Bill Lutz coming with his, he runs No Prep Kings with that thing and whatnot. It was this huge blow up about him coming to race at that race because the promoters of the race were trying to tell him he didn't fit the rules. Well, I went to bat for Bill. And the promoters cussed me and fussed me and said I was the cause of the demise of their race, blah, 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 but I told them, I sent them a screenshot of their own rule set. And I said, you go through this rule set and find a place where Bill doesn't fit. And the problem that they had was that the big payouts attracted a big time player, and he was going to come in there and pee in the sandbox. Right. Well, that's the problem when you start paying these big purses. The big money comes in, it weeds the bottom feeders out. The next thing you know, you've got a 10-car shootout, and that's over. It's over with. It's done because you've paid these huge purses, and it kills the little guy. But in your deal in particular, it's totally different from what I'm talking about. And you didn't do any harm. I think it's great, and I've thoroughly enjoyed myself at your deal, and hope that we can be back there next year. So,
well, hey, thanks, man. And I'm just being honest. I think it's fun to just have like casual conversations, candid conversations on here.
Yep.
And those thoughts enter my mind when I just think about the overall direction of the sport, and especially like some of these categories, pro mod specifically. And this is a great opportunity to kind of segue into what I think needs to be the next part of our conversation. Lyle, I would love to get your perspective on the NHRA Pro Mod category, the Eliminator as it stands today. I was involved in part of, or was working with you, talking to you regularly as you made your entrance into Pro Mod drag racing. And I think you fell in love with NHRA Pro Mod in 2018, 2019, right? When there was 30 cars at the U.S. Nationals, and it looked like, to just what you said about the No Prep King series, in 2019 at the U.S. Nationals, Pro Mod was at, I believe, an all-time high. NHRA Pro Mod was the hottest thing in drag racing. There were 30 cars there. You could hardly park the damn things. Nitrous cars, blower cars, turbo cars, not a ton of turbo cars, but still we had all these different combinations represented, tons of multi-car teams, tons of independent racers out there, the Clint Satterfields, the Jason Scruggs, the one-car operations, Jeremy Ray. I think of all these guys that were involved, Shane Molinari. I mean, there was just a ton of energy and enthusiasm. Fast forward 2 years, less than 2 years later, and I don't mean to talk out of turn, but quarter mile legal NHRA Pro Mod drag racing is a dumpster fire on its best day right now. And the NHRA just rolled out another rule change, and I know that maybe it's up in the air right now. I'm not sure what all the details are on that, and maybe you can shed a little light on it. But what's your take on the Pro Mod scene right now? I'm sure this is not what you expected when you made your debut. You didn't think that you'd be going to a race potentially in Brainerd next weekend where there's less than 10 cars entered right now.
Yeah. From the day that I struck the deal with Richard Freeman and everybody at Elite, how excited I was, and how pumped up my dad and I were to get the opportunity to compete at this level. We have literally fulfilled a lifelong dream already, and we rolled into Gainesville, 26 or 28 cars, huge field, qualified fourth in the last qualifier, besides Stevie Fast Jackson, the reigning champion, which caused him to not qualify. Like, you want to talk about rolling in and feeling like I had made a statement, like we were there.
Goosebumps. I mean,
we were there. Yeah. And I had honestly, that when I lost on a hole shot to JR Gray, it was a baby hole shot, and I mean, completely, I wanted to quit drag racing that day. Like, I was like, I am the biggest F up on the face of the planet. I just got beat by JR Gray on a hole shot in the quarterfinals at my very first national event after going fast enough technically to have won the race. So and so I leave there. I still like to this day, it makes me sick to my stomach to think about that. Sick, like knowing you've known me long enough and watched me race long enough that I don't lose on a whole shot much.
No, sir.
God bless. Thank you for letting me let go of the button on time. I don't do it much, and literally it makes me, I want to throw up right now. But so we go to Atlanta, I'm like, you know what? And Alex Laughlin, my teammate, he told me before we left Gainesville, he said, dude, he said, I feel you, dog. I've been there, but you got to be a better loser than you are a winner. And I still remember that conversation. And I try to remember that to keep myself from getting sick. But we roll into Atlanta, like half that many cars, barely had a full field. And I'm kind of like,
what happened?
Yeah. What happened? Where did all these people go? We roll into Charlotte, barely have enough to make a full field. Then I don't qualify, and and we'll talk about how my year has gone in a minute. Then we go to Norwalk, same thing, 17 cars, and I'm wondering, is this the beginning of the end? Like what is going on? And then we decided not to go to Denver for personal reasons, and they did not have a full field. And in Brainerd, it doesn't look like they're going to have a full field, and I don't know why. I don't know what the reasoning is. I think there's speculation. Everybody has their opinion. Some of them are probably right. Some of them are probably wrong. The NHRA has made 4 rule changes this year against the Pro Charge combination, some of which the others in the class believe the rule changes should have started last year. I don't disagree with that, but when you let a new combination in, you just kind of got to let it do its thing and figure out where it fits and then start trying to reel it in. Well, it came in last year and ran pretty good, but Stevie still wins the championship. The Roots car still wins majority of the races, so it didn't look that bad. Well, this year, Steve Petty, Jose, the Bahrain 1 crowd, and even us came out with the big dong swinging. They've qualified number 1 every race, won 4 out of 5. And the NHRA is just doing some of them we could consider knee-jerk reactions to this, but they're just trying, they're doing what they think is best. And it may not always be what's best, but they're doing the best that they can to try to keep parity in check. And they did. They made a rule change Monday night that came out, a 9,700 RPM rev limit on the Pro Charge combination and mandated a 457 rear gear. Well, that was a little knee jerk, and it happened way too close to Brainerd, but with that particular rule set, the Pro Charge combination will not make it to the finish line without hitting the rev limiter. So they are in the process now. After we went to them and the rules committee went to the NHRA and had a conversation yesterday, they are talking about making a revision to that rule, and then they're just trying to do what's best for the class, and it's a huge win, and it's kudos to the NHRA for
listening
to us. For once we feel like our voice is being heard, and that us as racers are their best tool. They've got to use your Eric Dillards and your Proline crew, use the Bahrain 1 crew, use the Elite Motorsports crew, use us as your data center to make those decisions, and they finally have done that. And I'm, I guess I could say really proud and feel like we have won, in the fact that the NHRA is listening to us and trying to do what is best for the class to keep the class here. And it's awesome that they're doing that. I hope that we should know something, hopefully tonight, what the new rule change could be. I don't even know what the possibilities are, what they're thinking about doing, but it looks like they're listening to us and going to try to make a revision to that rule before Brainerd, which is next weekend. And hopefully we all have time to make the proper changes and get to a racetrack and test before we have to to
go
roll
test
the
at
trainer.
an NHRA national event.
Right.
It's an interesting thing, Lyle, and I think it's worth exploring. And I got to give you credit, or give the NHRA credit as well. I mean, I would point to Lonnie Grimm. To be honest, Lonnie's a new addition to the NHRA's technical staff in 2021. I think he has a tremendous track record in the sport of being someone that is a racer, a racer's friend, a proponent of the racer, and willing to listen and willing to have tough discussions to try to sort things out and do what's best for whatever category, whatever class he's writing rules for. So I'm really, really glad to hear that. I am curious, though, about trying to explore what exactly is going on. I do think we have to accept that there's a wild time we're living in, right? I mean, there are plenty of people that are hurting. There are plenty of businesses that are struggling. However, there is an equal, if not greater, amount of businesses that are booming right now, especially in our space. I mean, if you look around the motorsports world, I mean, I talk to business owners in this industry day in and day out, and I can't tell you how many times I've heard people tell me inside of the last year that they were up double digits in 2020, and they're en route to having their biggest year yet in 2021. But I do think we have to accept that some of the travel issues, right? Some of the international players in our sport have had some struggles, or excuse me, some of the international players in Pro Mod have had some struggles getting into the country or having to spend insane amounts of money to get into the country. But I feel it's the class NHRA Pro Mod drag racing. There was a switch that was thrown, I believe, when it became accessible to more people. I wonder if it lost some of its exclusivity. At its height, the NHRA Pro Mod series, for as much positive as was said about it and as much excitement as there was also an equal amount of people that were like detractors or bent out of shape because it was a country club or a boys club or a good old boys club, and you had to know someone to get in, and it was hard to get in. And if you were going to get in and you didn't have grade points, you were probably having to sponsor a race or spend $20, $30, $40, $50,000. And I wonder, as I can certainly admit that there are negatives to that, I do think it's a double-edged sword, and some of that I think adds some sizzle and some spice to it. Everybody wants what no one else has, right? Yeah. And there was an air of exclusivity about racing NHRA Pro Mod. And when the NHRA took over control of the class from the Real Pro Mod Association in 2019, between 2019 and 2020, and they made it so that basically anybody that wanted to enter, that had a car that would pass tech and was willing to pay the $900 or $1,500, you could enter Pro Mod. I mean, you could enter. Anybody that wanted to enter, as long as there was space, you could get in. And I personally wonder a little bit if that, like subconsciously amongst the masses, it's not as special maybe as it was when it was hard to get in. I don't know how much it has contributed to it, but I think more than anybody wants to admit.
Yeah. On the flip side of that, if the ones that were able or had the grade points or the funds or whatever to get in, if there weren't enough of those left still running for whatever reason, Troy retires, whoever, then I almost think that they're forced to do what they've done. Open it up, start letting
Agreed. But I think
anybody.
It's like the timing of it. I think if they would have, there was like two distinct paths. There was keep it a country club, keep it kind of a boys club where it was an association, whatever. Keep it the Freemasons of drag racing, right?
Yeah.
Or open it up. But what they did, I think, is they kind of they put a bunch of rules in place, right? A bunch of safety rules and a bunch of things in place that, in my opinion, really speak to that elite crowd, the super high-end, well-financed, well-resourced group. So if you're going to open it up and welcome everybody in, you need to have rules that open up and welcome everybody in. They tried to put two things together. I mean, most of these guys they should have, when they opened it up, in my opinion, and allowed anybody that wanted to buy a tech card to come race, you should have been able to pick up 2, 3, 4, 5 cars at every track, local guys. You go to Charlotte, you're going to get, just for the sake of ease here, you're going to get Tommy Franklin, Jay Cox, Jason Harris, you're going to get some of those East Coast players, right, that have cars that, per the NHRA's rule changes, are legal. Yep. Well, the NHRA follows up the decision to open things up with, you got to have tunnels, right? You got to put all this carbon fiber in the car. You got to put the coating under the front end, right, to make the fireproof coating under the front end. You've got to have the Leahy box, the auto shut off, all this stuff. Most of those guys aren't willing to make that investment and do that work, make their car harder to work on, make their car harder to race, put more electronics on it that can fail elsewhere, right, when they're not needed. Most of those guys aren't going to do that to race once or twice a year. Does that make sense? I mean, I don't know if...
Oh, that's in many meetings that we've had just this year we've had at least 2 or 3 at several of the national events. And that has been a huge topic of conversation from several of the other racers, is that the carbon transmission tunnel enclosure rule alone, I do believe, is keeping your 3 to 5 regional racers away from every single national event we attend.
Because most of those guys don't have any desire to go run every race.
Right.
They don't want to.
Well,
but they do when the circus comes to town.
That's exactly right. Yeah,
they can be involved.
When we go to Dallas, we should be able to pick up several Midwest Pro Mod cars. When we come to Charlotte, Gainesville, Atlanta, we should pick up 3 to 5 East Coast Pro Mod players, right? And I agree. I do agree that I think that rule alone is keeping those out, and it's, if you, I haven't, but I think if you were to talk to the NHRA about that, it's a safety thing, and I get that, if
anybody understands the safety aspect of it, it's Lyle.
So
Barnett.
I can't sit here and say I think they're a bunch of idiots because they're mandating these safety rules. Safety equipment's what kept me alive, so I can't. I agree. I think that is the reason we're not picking them up, but I can't say that I agree that they should lift it. One suggestion that I have heard is that you get a 1 or 2 race grace period every year, that if you don't have it, you get 1 race, or if you don't have it, you get 2 races a year or something. Otherwise, you are not allowed to run any more races that year. That, I think, is a viable option.
But, 1,000,000%. That I had a conversation late last week with Stevie Fast Jackson, and
he's the one I got that from.
He's a big proponent of some sort of grace period, or a little bit of a waiver. And to be honest, I agree. We're big proponents at Drag Illustrated, and I think everybody in drag racing is a proponent of safety in general. No one wants to see anyone hurt. No one wants to see replays of situations like you faced, Lyle, and we all, I think, are grateful that our sport is as safe as it is, right? But when you start talking about the inventory of cars and the nuts and bolts of this stuff and what it takes to create, to keep these things healthy over the course of time, forcing, putting the onus on all these guys to spend all this money and make all these changes to their car for an opportunity to race maybe once a year, I don't think it's going to happen, So I think that's a smart suggestion.
I've heard I don't know, because it was already done to the car that I drive in NHRA Pro Mod, but I've heard it's a $15,000 hit, to get it all done, and make just let's just say a PDRA Pro Boost car that is not NHRA legal, to take it from Pro Boost rules and make it NHRA legal. I've heard it's a $15,000.
I've heard everywhere from $15,000 to $23,000. I actually had one racer send me a bill so I could see it, and he sent me an invoice, and it was $23,000 to get a car that was, raceable anywhere else, to be NHRA legal, and it's $23,000. And I thought to myself, very few guys are willing to spend that kind of money if it's not going to make their car lighter, faster, more consistent. I mean, I hate to say that, and it is, but that's always been the case. I mean, racers, it's that whole needs versus wants. I've experienced this at my dad's repair shop all the time. My dad runs an auto repair shop, and the same guy that comes in and is just totally pissed that he has to spend $187 putting brake rotors on his Toyota truck is the same guy that 2 weeks later will be thrilled to give you $5,000 for a set of wheels and tires that bro-does
Dude,
his
that
truck.
only happened one time. You got to keep bringing it up. Jesus.
But it's true because
Is he talking about you?
Yeah,
But in general, it's the difference between needs versus wants. I need to put front brakes on my truck and I'm pissed about it, but I want to put some 26s on it or whatever, right? And that difference changes everything. And when you put all these racers in a position like you need to do this, that's not a good motivator, right? Now, if that change was $20,000 and their car was going to pick up 400s, here's my credit card. Here you go.
Yeah.
Go ahead and swipe
absolutely.
it. Swipe it.
I'll take two.
You know what I mean? Take two. But
Yeah.
in that moment, that's a very, very tough sell.
Yeah.
So here's, hopefully someone's listening that. I don't know. I can't really come up with a valid reason not to do something like that. I understand that there's, no one wants to see anybody get hurt, but there's some inherent danger to what we do out here. Lyle Barnett's living proof that this is a dangerous deal. I don't know that there's a way to make it perfectly safe, to eliminate any room for error or any room for something bad to happen. But I do think if the NHRA Pro Mod Series wants to return to its former glory, that's something that they're going to have to consider doing.
Yeah. I mean, something's got to be done, and it's got to be done fairly quick, like by the end of the year, I think, or, we may not be talking about NHRA Pro Mod very long, and
that's right.
And that's bad. And, and Justin Elks, owner at Modern and my crew chief for my Pro Mod, we talked about this yesterday, that NHRA Pro Mod has to exist. It has to. It is the elite. It is the pinnacle of Doorslammer drag racing, and it has to be something that people look up to from beer money level, from 7.0 index to top sportsman. It has to be something that is there. When NHRA Pro Mod exists, it's like all is right, and I don't.
And there was a time before that it was IHRA Pro Mod.
Right.
And I think a lot of times John Ford III, one of our senior photographers at Drag Illustrated, he brought this up to me one time. Is there any class in drag racing that has spawned more children, if you will, than Pro Mod? Right? I mean, if you look at what Pro Mod represents, like its heritage in the IHRA and now in the NHRA, there's all these other sanctions and series and all these other little offshoots and Thursday night shootouts. And what cars end up in those shootouts? What crew chiefs, what parts end up there? Right? It's always a car that was run by Mike Castellana's car, right? I mean, Mike Castellana runs a different car every 2 years, right? Yep. Well, those cars end up in Big Dog. They end up in Pro Boost. They end up at a Quick 8 shootout in Texas. They end up in wherever. So it's to your point and Justin Elk's point, this class has to exist. I mean, we have to have high level pro modified drag racing because it feeds a lot of other parts of our sport. I mean,
well, you think about the businesses out there that maybe not completely revolve around, but depend on the hype and that level of pro mod drag racing to keep the doors open. Like Modern. Like it's super important to modern racing that NHRA Pro Mod exist, right? Like super important. And
1,000,000%.
And we're not the only ones. And so it's just a hope and a pray, and we pray that the NHRA and it seems as though they're starting to listen to us, and we a huge win when we went to them with a suggestion about another rule change within 48 hours, and they are listening, and it looks like they're considering it and may do something, but I just hope that something happens and that they're paying attention and listening to conversations like we're having right now. And I know this is going on in other places, but I just hope that they take action and do something because we need it. That you need it at Drag Illustrated. We need it at Modern Racing. And there are many others that need it, to
chassis shops. I mean, there's hardly a company that isn't impacted by it in some way, shape, or form. And it, like I said, not just on the NHRA Pro Mod level, but all the trickle down everywhere else these cars end up throughout their life. Maybe it's radial tire. I mean, how many big tire cars have been put a wider rear end housing in it and put radials on it? I mean, it happens all the time. Yeah. So it's a very, very important part.
Is that where the RPM group had a hand up, basically? I mean, it was basically ran by the racers, right? So
a couple racers, or one in particular, Danny Rowe, honestly was like
listen to the other racers, and
but I think I think they had leverage too. I personally, I think that the arrangement between, and obviously hindsight's 2020, right? I mean, it's easy to look back on something, and go, oh, we shouldn't have done that. But I think when the Real Pro Mod Association kind of turned the keys of the castle over to the NHRA, they lost a lot of leverage, right? They lost a lot of ability to say, hey, this is what we want to have happen. And now it didn't always happen. And there were many times that it didn't work out the way that, you know, the Real Pro Mod Association maybe wanted. But man, they had the NHRA's ear. They had a business relationship. Money was changing hands, you know, up front, right? The Real Pro Mod Association essentially paid an administrative fee to the NHRA to run their group at NHRA national events. So in some regards, the NHRA treated the RPM group as a customer. That's an important situation, right? That's a very valuable relationship to have. So I think when the NHRA took over the administration and the operation of the Pro Mod category, the racers lost some leverage, right? They kind of said, hey, we'll do what you tell us to do, right? And now had everything worked out maybe the way that it was supposed to, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation. Obviously, a ton of things have happened. The Pro Charger car has certainly impacted things. Well, last question. Do you think there's anything that can be done, Lyle, to bring pro modified drag racing on the quarter mile back to, you know, 4 or 5 nitrous cars, 4 or 5 turbo cars, 4 or 5 roots blower cars, 4 or 5 turbo cars? Is there anything that can be done at this stage in the game to recreate that environment, or has that ship sailed?
I don't think the ship has necessarily sailed, but honestly, it's all in the rules package. You know, they've got to, and hopefully now, like I've said several times, hopefully now they're starting to listen, and we can see the turbo car return, and hopefully see the nitrous car become competitive again, and you know, and they'll reel the Pro Charger back in. You know, but they've got to get a better handle on the rules and find a rule set, you know, and stick to it. And hopefully we're on the verge of that happening. You know, you talked about Lonnie Grimm earlier, and he's probably got the worst job you could possibly. I mean, it's a huge position to hold, and they're huge shoes to fill, you know, but you couldn't pay me enough to hold the position that Lonnie Grimm does, you know, because it takes somebody with the knowledge of your Justin Elks and your Eric Dillards and your Mike Janices and your Ricky Smiths, you know, and folks like that. It takes that kind of knowledge and that kind of experience to truly fill the position like it needs to be filled, you know. And I'm not saying Lonnie isn't capable of doing that, but Lonnie hasn't raced Pro Mod for 30, 40, 50 years, you know, and unless you truly understand a pro modified from bumper to bumper, roof to floor, you know, and how to make those things run, you know, totally different combinations, totally different power levels, you know, they're just all 4 combinations are just totally different. And until you truly understand how to do that and can, you know, make the decision for the class as a whole, you know, you have to depend on others to give you influence and information.
And you have to trust that they're giving you good information.
Exactly right.
And I think that's one of the toughest things that any of these rule makers really face, is getting good information, because God bless drag racers. They make the world go round for me and many others, but it's very hard to get like the straight dirt, because it's so hard for a racer to take off their helmet, right? It's very difficult for them to look at these situations through the lens of the greater good, right? It's hard. And I honestly, if I had to identify something that has been detrimental for the last couple of years, it's bad information. I don't know who's responsible for that bad information,
the people necessarily, you just talked about.
But there is
the racers that keep their helmet on.
Yeah, I mean, it's very difficult, because I'll tell you, like, every time one of these there's been 4 rule changes in 2021, right? Every time one of them has happened, my phone rings and it's, oh my God, we are never, ever, this thing won't even idle. It won't even idle. We won't be able to get it out of the trailer, right? We may as well not show up. And then the next thing I know, they're like number 3 qualifier and just ran their career best. Yeah. And I want to grab them by the shoulders and be like, why do you, like, bro, you're lying to me. You're lying to yourself. I don't know, but it's very difficult for the NHRA to make a real good decision because they got someone telling them that, hey, if you do that, our car won't start.
Right.
You know, and only to see them do exactly that in the next race, that guy wins.
Yeah. And then then what's the NHRA have to do? They're forced to make yet another rule change. You know, and we've seen it. You know, you're right. When they took the 20 points of overdrive from us after Gainesville, you would have thought that there would be no Pro Charger cars left in the
ever
class.
Again.
Honestly, I didn't know what the hell we were going to do. You know, right. I mean, we took 20 points overdrive in it, went to Darlington, I believe Darlington or Virginia won, and went to run, and we're all like, no idea what we're going to do, you know, but you take a step back and kind of figure out what's going on, and you adapt and overcome, and off you go, you know, and we managed to figure it out and go back to running good. But, you know, every time they've made a rule change, I agree, it's been, you know, they've gotten bad information, maybe in certain situations been lied to, you know, just for somebody to go out and have the advantage for one more race. And, you know,
and it's hard for me to fault any real competitor. It really is. Like, I can't be mad at anybody. I really can't. But it just speaks to the challenge, Lyle. And you're exactly right. And I'm glad you brought that up, because Murder Tundra and I talked about it at the beginning of the show, that it's fun to bag on the NHRA, and it's fun to bag on these guys, and it's easy to hate them. It really is. But man, that is a very, very difficult job that I would be more apt to go to work at a fast food restaurant than do that.
Absolutely.
You know, there's no chance that I would want to be in that line of work. And I tip my cap to all those guys, you know, John Sear, PDRA, Lonnie Graham. I mean, there's dozens of them, right? That are forced to make those tough decisions. It's a wild time, man.
And they get you know, they make a rule change and they get MF'd up one side and down the other. When I see you the next time, I'm gonna punch you in the mouth. You know, like they deal with that thing and they know it. They're like, well, about to hit send on this email. Here comes a death threat. You know, like, you might as well be nailing your own coffin together when you do it.
Look at John Sears, man. I mean, over the years, like, you can't blame him for wanting to walk away several times.
No, I don't know how he's managed to stick around as long as he has. You know,
I really don't either.
And nobody, there's not a human being on this earth that could say, you know what, John, I want to buy X275 from you, and I want you to go enjoy it. I'm gonna take over. There's not a human on this earth that could do it. Not one.
No, there's really not, man. Well, Lyle, thank you so much for being a part of this. It's been great to talk drag racing with you. It's fantastic to see you having the success that you do. I do look forward to seeing you at the NHRA national event, the Lucas Oil Nationals at Brainerd International Raceway. Super fun part of the country to go to, a fan base that is upside down and on fire for the sport. I don't know if you've experienced Brainerd in all its glory, the zoo and everything else, 40 acres of campground and party animals. It's pretty spectacular, man. Yeah, JT, we would never see you again.
Absolutely not.
It would be the end.
I'd be out of your hair though all weekend. You know,
if JT went to the zoo, I would make a note in my phone, and in 10 years, I would go back and look for the most ragged pop-up camper in the corner, and I guarantee you JT would be there shirtless and in his whitey tighties.
Still there, man.
Like, hey, man, waiting for the national event to come around.
Just can't wait for the drag races to come back. You
Need
know,
my 7-iron.
It's a scene, man. It's an absolute scene. And you know what? I'll just close on this. I am bummed, and I hope we do see. I hope we're surprised by the turnout of NHRA Pro Mod cars at the Lucas Oil Nationals in Brainerd, because it's an incredible facility that's really a landmark on the NHRA schedule. It's well known and loved, and it is an expensive part of the country to go to. It's resort town up there. It's vacation area up there. Hotels are high. Everything's high. But I tell you what, it's a great place. It's a great group of people, a great fan base that deserve to see a hell of a show. And I hope racers come out and support that event the way that it deserves to be supported. I'm looking forward to seeing you there, Lyle. Maybe I'll bring old Murder Tundra with me, and we'll go up there and hit the zoo for a day or two.
Better put a shot collar on him.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. He'll need a leash for sure. I watched a school bus burn to the ground up there, and people in it, like, having to escape. there's some wild, I mean, burning couches. There's nightclubs going on. There's shiny poles in a lot of different places. It's a scary place. It's not scary in a bad way, scary in a good way, you know?
Yeah, JT, I think you should probably stay in at home.
Yeah, matter of fact, my wife just logged in and said no. The only time she'll come in. No. So, well, thanks, Lyle. I appreciate it. Tell everybody at the shop hello, Todd, Mike, everybody, Justin. We appreciate your time. Sorry to burn up your afternoon.
Hey, dude, it's all good. Anytime with y'all is good. So anytime you need me to fill in, holla.
You got it, brother.
Good luck,
dude. We'll see you soon.
Later, man. See you.
Bye-bye.
Later.
What a deal, man. Well, we had a heck of a show here today, brother. I appreciate it so much. You taking the time to spend with me here 2 hours on a Wednesday afternoon. Hey, that's a good time to talk drag racing, right?
Yeah, right.
Thank you guys so much. We had a hell of a crowd here throughout. A lot of great comments, a lot of valuable perspective. That's one of the things. Mike Carpenter, who's been a partner or co-host here on the show the last few weeks, he's on vacation this week. We'll look forward to having Mike back next Wednesday. But he said to me after the show last week, he goes, man, like, people need to study the comments because there's like some really smart people. There's some people that know our sports history that have done a lot of things. It's a who's who of the drag racing world in the comments. So thank you guys all for being a part of this. Thanks for clicking share. I get a notification. My phone pops up when someone shares it, and we get a bunch of them. So thank you guys for being a part of this. Yeah, it does. It's crazy, right? Sometimes I get tagged in a lot of stuff, and that's the funny one, right? When you get tagged in something, you're like, oh, I didn't see this. It was amidst of
now I'm it.
So, well, hey, happy birthday to your little girl, turned 15 today. Happy birthday to your dad. A double whammy. Richard Hudson. Richard. Did you see the joke that I put? I put happy birthday. I spelled birthday the same way he spelled his name on Facebook. So I thought it was funny. It might not have been that funny, but I thought it was funny. Thanks, Murder Tundra. I appreciate it. Hey, gang, stay tuned. We'll be back next Wednesday. Same bat time, same bat channel. We surely appreciate your support, helping us. It sounds a little cliche at this stage in the game, but I'm going to say it anyways. Trying to make drag racing great again, or greater than it already is. So thank you all for being here. We'll see you next Wednesday.